Unified School District Board of Education for Tuesday, January 23rd, 2018. May we have a roll call, please?
Student Board Member Athanayak.
Present.
Board Member Trutain.
Here.
Board Member Clark.
Here.
Board Member Blanchard.
Here.
Vice President Stapleton Gray.
Here.
President Black.
Here. For those who wish to participate, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. We have a reading of the AUSD mission and vision statement.
Absolutely. The mission of the Albany Unified School District is to provide excellent public education that empowers all to receive their fullest potential as productive citizens. AUSD is committed to creating comprehensive learning opportunities in a safe, supportive, and collaborative environment, addressing the individual needs of each student.
Thank you. Does anyone want any changes to the agenda before we approve it?
Yeah, I have a couple of things I wanted to bring up. The first one is, if my memory is correct, I thought last time when we were speaking to some of the special ed people that we had asked them how much time that they would like allotted, and I thought they said 40 minutes. So I was hoping we can add 10 minutes to the 30 minutes that allotted for them right now.
Absolutely. We put it at the end of the meeting, so if they needed more time, it wouldn't be a problem. So
All right.
sure, we can add more time.
Thank you very much. And the second one was going over the agenda. I didn't see anything about the hiring freeze, so I was hoping we can get that agendized another time. At the last meeting, Board Member Stapleton Gray asked me to shoot him an email, and I did, as far as how much time I thought might be sufficient. So it's not here tonight, so maybe we can get it on as soon as possible.
It is already agendized for, I believe, the February 13th board meeting. Did you have a specific amount of time that you would like me to make sure that is on there?
Well, what I said to Ross is I put 15, and I said if it's shorter, great, and if it's longer, the board can decide if I need to extend it.
But it is agendized.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay. Any other changes or additions to the agenda? Can we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda as minorly amended.
I second that.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. The consent calendar, does anyone want to comment on or pull any items in the consent calendar?
Yeah, I do. As part of the consent calendar, we're approving the school accountability report cards for the secondary schools. And I made up a little slide that I hope we could display.
Okay, while we're waiting for that, were there any other comments or items in the consent that anyone wants to note? Okay, let's see Kim's slide then.
Oh, okay, here we are. So each of the school accountability report cards list the state-required student group percentages. So I just copy-pasted the information from the individual school accountability report cards and put it all in one table, and it looks like it got cut off a little bit. But anyhow, I thought it was worthwhile for us to all just sort of take a minute. Of course, the middle school and the high school have, all Albany students combined, and so that just is what it is. A little bit of change each year as the population shifts. But there are some differences in the elementary schools, and since we use a parent choice method for selecting schools that is not, done by the district. Most of that is the result of parent choice. But I do think that it's worth noting that all of our schools are, the majority of students are minorities. So that's the population we serve. I want to make a a comment that these student groups are the ones determined by the state, and of course Hispanic or Latino is a cultural group. It's not really an ethnic group. There's a number of ethnicities that would be a part of that, but still every school in Albany is majority minority. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Does anyone else want to comment on the consent calendar? Do we have a motion on the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Board and superintendent report.
Thank you very much, President Black, trustees. I had the privilege of meeting with an Albany High School student this week for about an hour, and the student has met with me before, but we really had a good conversation around issues for students who are transgender, gender fluid, from as early as preschool all the way up through high school. And the student shared with me what it was like to be in a system outside of the country versus what it was like to be in a system inside of Albany. So it was a really good discussion because it gave me a lot of insight into what a student faces at home and what a student, in terms of support, is needed in our schools. And we also talked about transgender bathrooms. And this is a student who also is sitting in on the committee that is looking at the high school wing. So we're going to continue to meet. And this is also a student who has a tremendous desire to continue educating students. So I did want to share that with you because some of the highlights of my job is that every now and then I do actually get to a school site. I did also want to highlight just some important meetings for this week that the public may need to know about. Our budget advisory work group is going to meet tomorrow at 5:30. We have an LCAP advisory meeting that is also coming up on Thursday at 4:30. The Wellness Committee meets tomorrow at 4 o'clock. And then on Thursday afternoon, I'm going to continue with my next meeting with the Berkeley Community College Teacher Preparation Program Group to continue our work on hopefully bringing a program to Albany High School where students can be duly enrolled in both college classes as well as in Albany, and actually hopefully having this program on our Albany High School campus so our students don't have to travel to Berkeley City College. Thank you.
Thanks. Other board members want to comment? Jacob?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but I had an email that I wanted to read for somebody who was not able to attend the board meeting tonight. It was related to the budget committee. So should I save it until then? Or?
Yeah, save it till
Thank you.
item. Ross?
I just wanted to note an email, I'm not sure if it came via the CSBA, but a comment that a group had surveyed all of the states and had rated California an F in terms of how it prepared students for financial literacy, sort of basic fundamental life skills. And I've absolutely heard that from students that they would like more such things. I don't know as there's so much we can pack into other classes in the formal curriculum, but we used to have adult ed classes. We could certainly have adjunct things outside of the normal school day, and if there's a demand in the community, and particularly among our students, for things like financial literacy and life skills, it'd be great to look at how to make those more accessible.
Thanks. Anyone else? Okay, moving on. Student board members report.
Absolutely. The Albany Education Foundation and Albany Community Foundation are hosting a chocolate and champagne gala on Saturday, February 10th from 7 to 10 p.m. at the Northbrae Community Church. This special event will include wine, champagne, beer, chocolate, and non-chocolate desserts, and savory treats. Marin Elementary School is hosting a movie night this Friday, January 26th. Come see Cars 3 and enjoy Lightning McQueen's Race to the Top. Priority enrollment for new kindergarten through 5th grade students to the Albany Unified School District for the 2018-2019 school year will begin on Thursday, February 1st, and end on Saturday, March 31st. Families can begin online enrollment and make enrollment appointments beginning Wednesday, January 17th. Would you like to get help with your kids? Would you like to get help? Excuse me. Would you like help to get? Oh my God. Would you like to help your kids get along better and become better friends with each other? There will be a parent education night at Cornell on January 25th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Parenting coach Rebecca Freeling will show you how to resolve conflicts in a way that leaves all parties feeling heard and empowered, and many other skills. Don't miss out. Take your kids bowling and support Cornell PTA on Sunday, January 28th from 10 a.m. to noon at the Albany Bowl. Grab your pin pals and head over for a fun morning of strikes and spares. $12 gets you shoe rentals and 2 games of bowling, and $5 will go back to Cornell PTA to support their many programs. The 5th grade winter choir concert is on Tuesday, January 30th at 7 p.m. in the Albany High School Little Theater. Grab a rake, hammer, or paintbrush and come join the Cornell crew work party for some fun school improvements. No experience is needed, just a desire to beautify the school, meet people, and have fun. Bring the whole family, as everyone is welcome to participate, especially children. And that ends the Student Board Report.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for Evan? All right. Persons to address the board on matters not on the agenda. I know we have at least one. Let's come up to the podium.
Okay. My son started an 8-week art class last week at Cornell, and in order for him to participate, I had to sign a waiver releasing something called the Sticky Art Lab from liability in case he was injured because of negligence on the part of the organization. If my son is going to go to the overnight program at Camp Campbell with his 4th grade class this year, I must first release the camp from responsibility for negligence. Recently, my son took part in a bicycle safety program at school, and he couldn't have done so if I hadn't signed a form saying that I wouldn't hold the organization's safe routes to school and cycles of change responsible if my son was injured, even due to gross negligence. On one hand, this district feeds students into programs that require parents to give program staff what amounts to a license to injure children through negligence. On the other hand, the district's self-stated mission is, in part, to create, quote, learning opportunities in a safe environment, unquote. There's a glaring contradiction here. My point isn't that all waivers are ill-advised. My point is that waivers that specifically exempt programs from liability for injuries caused by negligence are ill-advised. Here's how the Free Dictionary defines negligence. Quote, conduct that falls below the standards of behavior established by law for the protection of others against unreasonable risk of harm. A person has acted negligently if he or she is departed from the conduct expected of a reasonably prudent person acting under similar circumstances, unquote. The argument that a child participating in such a program runs only a small risk of injury doesn't make these waivers acceptable. If only one child, 1 out of 100, 1 out of 1,000, is injured due to negligence, why should the negligent party not be held accountable? Frighteningly, reducing their accountability up front reduces organizations' motivation to take reasonable caution. As far as I know, the district does not require students to participate in any activities that require such a waiver. But that's not good enough. If the district truly is committed to student safety, it should not in any way invite student participation in such activities. None of these services is indispensable to the education of our children. Ways of enriching children's lives are limitless, but our children are a finite resource. I propose that this board adopt a policy prohibiting district officials, administrators, and teachers from inviting students to participate in activities in which parents or guardians or students themselves, once they reach the age of majority, must sign waivers absolving program providers from liability for injury due to negligence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we ask staff to look into where these waivers come from, why we have these? And we might want to refer it to the policy committee to see if we do need a policy on that.
We can do that.
Thank you. Charlie.
I would second your request and just amplify slightly. It would help me to know if the waivers are district waivers or if they're written by other institutions. And it sounds like maybe we should be looking at our existing board policies to determine what we have already that covers these.
Yes. That's Justice Jacob.
So yeah, I have a question about that. If they're signing the waiver saying that the other organization is not liable for negligence, then are we liable, obviously, if a child gets hurt?
Okay, we'll
So
have to
why
ask
would
them.
we take the responsibility off of them and put it on us?
Yeah, we'll have to ask staff to look into that. Good question.
So just want to clarify, so Jack, you got the 3 different questions that, so we'll make sure that we answer each of those questions. We can bring that back to the board.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else here to address the board on matters not on the agenda? Thank you. Moving on, we have a staff report promoting safe, supportive, and collaborative environments for all students and staff.
Thank you, President Black. I'm going to turn this over to Carrie Nerheim, who is our new Director of Student Services, and Melissa Poole, who is our Marin Principal. Ms. Nerheim.
Well, I want to thank everybody. Today's my 15th day on the job, and I am in love with Albany. It's an amazing district, and I am honored to work with such dedicated people. So excited to talk about the Museum of Tolerance tonight, and we are so fortunate that 2 different groups of employees are going to be able to visit the museum. A high school group is going to be going January 31st and February 1st, and then an elementary group of staff members will be going on the 21st and the 22nd. And tonight we have the wonderful Melissa Poole from Marin Elementary, who's going to share with us how this came about.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks, Carrie. So in order to talk about the Museum of Tolerance, I need to take you back for a minute to last year, because that's when it all started. As many of you know, I was an assistant principal at the high school last year, and last November, 2 of our dedicated resource teachers, Carla Swan and Kate Farner, went to the Museum of Tolerance for a workshop. They came back from this workshop on fire with enthusiasm and excitement after receiving an incredibly inspirational training. I've attended many workshops in my years as an educator, and I know that they are not all created equal. And when staff members glow in the way that Carla and Kate did when they came back from this workshop, it was something to take notice of and pay attention to. They spoke about their inner growth. They talked about examining their own bias and having concrete strategies to support their students. But mostly, they spoke about wanting to encourage others to attend the trainings as well and share in the experience. Also in November, and in hindsight now, I can clearly see that our world began to change. And while I didn't know it then, my first indicator of this was the Albany High walkout the day after President Trump was elected. Darren McNally and I accompanied more than 100 passionate, courageous Albany High students to UC Berkeley. We passed a very crowded Sproul Plaza, it was very crowded that day, and followed the kids because they knew that the Campanile was a better spot. The memory of listening to those who so eloquently spoke on the steps of the Campanile that day while everyone listened in silence will stay with me, I'm sure, for many years to come. Because hearing high school students you remember as third graders speak of the need for justice, equality, and love in our world is a gift that I wish every educator could have. I didn't understand the significance of this moment then or the era that was beginning for all of us. I spent a great deal of time last year, as many of us did, attempting to keep up with the rapidly changing news cycles and grasping for an understanding of how our national climate was affecting our students. It seems that the UCLA, the University of California at LA, was grappling with the same questions and conducted a study last spring entitled Teaching and Learning in the Age of Trump. Several of our very own Albany High teachers participated in this study, along with over 1,500 high school teachers from across the country. This study linked the national climate to school climates, acknowledging that as the political discourse had gotten increasingly more hostile since the election of President Trump, high schools across the country also experienced an increase in anxiety, stress, and hostility. Albany educators have always been committed to being thoughtful and reflective about their work, and I know And what I know about our Albany staff is that they're committed to evolving based on the circumstances and the changing needs of the students that walk through our doors. And this is only what can explain why 42 pre-K through 5th grade teachers, para-educators, office staff, administrators, and district office officials have volunteered to give up 2 days of their midwinter break to go to LA to the Museum of Tolerance together. I am hopeful that this trip will provide an opportunity for our elementary educators to reflect on who we are, what we stand for, and how we can encourage our children to do the same. While the agenda is still being crafted in collaboration with the museum staff, I know that we will be examining implicit bias, discussing race and racism, examining areas of our lives in which we experience privilege or lack thereof, and learning concrete strategies that we can use with our students. I've greatly appreciated the compassion and concern with which our community has come together during these challenging times, and I know that Albany educators cannot be alone in doing this very important work. It has to include families, and it has to include parents. So last week, University of California at Berkeley professor and assistant dean of diversity inclusion, Rudy Mendoza Denton, gave a parent education night that supported parents from all 3 elementary schools in starting to understand how implicit bias works and discussing how parents can support one another in talking about race and racism at home. Due to an incredibly thought-provoking workshop and the enthusiasm of the parents who were there, what was intended to be a one-time only presentation will hopefully be expanding into a series of talks that will continue to include parents from across the district. We're in the process of confirming a date in February to get together again, and I encourage anyone who cares about our children and who wants to work toward positive change, attend this fabulous series. At the core of all of these efforts is collaboration, unity, and a willingness for all of us to examine our responsibility and work together to do our part. I'm inspired by the possibilities that the Museum of Tolerance will create for our staff and by the potential for change that's created by working with parents through Professor Mendoza Denton's workshops. I have great expectations and super high hopes for what we can do for our children together in the coming months. Thank you to our superintendent, Val Williams, for supporting all of these efforts, and to Carrie Neerheim for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts with you tonight.
Thank you. Can you give that to Jackie so it can be included in the minutes?
Sure.
And if you have a digital copy, I'm sure she'd appreciate that.
I do. I am very excited. Thank you so much for that. And I will be attending as well, along with Superintendent Williams, to get to be part of the learning and the conversation so that we can bring it back. Part of what they're going to be giving to us are some lessons and activities that can be brought back into the classroom, in addition to the teacher resources that have vocabulary and concepts that we can go over with our students, and it will be, it is in alignment with the California state standards. So I cannot wait to go, and I can't wait to bring back to you what we've learned and how we're going to go forward with implementation. And so with that, does the board have, or anyone have any questions for us?
Charlie?
Well, it's not a question, and you've really almost answered it, but I will say that I'm looking forward to hearing what you learn.
Thank you.
Yep.
Another comment, I was also at the workshop at Marin Elementary with the parents from all the elementary schools for Dr. Mendoza Denton's talk. Wasn't a talk, it was a workshop. Yeah, we all worked, and it was very, very good. I look forward to attending more in that series, and I just want to point out that with Dr. Mendoza Denton being the director of the Center for the Greater Good at University of California, Berkeley, and his particular field of research into racism and discrimination, that is a real resource that we have right here in our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Anyone else?
I think what Ms. Poole is not telling you is it took somebody to help coordinate all of this effort, and she worked closely with the 2 elementary principals, but she took on the bulk of this to do this. And you were really commended. For our teachers to give up 2 of their vacation days to do this is commendable. And in the spirit of fairness, and I will be attending with them, I am going to take 2 vacation days to make sure that this is not part of my work here, that is vacation time, because I do want to learn alongside with the teachers. So I want to thank you, Melissa, for really working with our teacher leaders and actually taking the leadership on this. Well done.
Thank you. Anything else? The audience?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we now have some review and action items. And the first is to receive and hopefully approve our 2016-17 financial audit report.
Thank you. I'm going to turn this and the next series of items over to our Chief Business Official, Alan Gard.
Thank you, Superintendent Williams. I was hoping to combine the 4 audit reports. They're all related. I have a brief overview about it, and then we also have 2 people who would like to comment and speak to the board about the items.
Is the board okay with hearing them all at once?
I think we have to, with only 2.5 minutes for each one.
Okay.
It better be en masse.
Okay.
Thanks. So we have 4 audit reports. These are for the 2016-17 fiscal year that ended June 30, 2017. We have Christie White and Associates, which conducted the audit. These audits are all required. For the first item, which is the financial audit report, this is a requirement of Education Code 41020.03. For the next 3 audit reports, they are mandated by the specific ballot language within each bond measure. The 3 bond measures are the 2008 Measure E bond, which is the pool bond, and the 2016 Measure B bond, and the 2016 Measure E bond. These are all called financial and performance audits because in addition to the standard financial audit where they would review the financials and ensure that the expenditures were in line with the allowance with the ballot language, they also conduct a performance audit where they actually go out to the schools. They essentially make sure that the building that we said we would build is there or in construction. But specifically for these 3 audits, because it was in the very beginning stages of the bond program, the auditors didn't feel a need to actually do the field audit. All 4 audit reports received an unmodified report, which is that the reports are reported fairly, accurately. They do not review all the transactions that have occurred for the financial year, but what they do is they conduct a review of what is statistically significant in order to provide reasonable assurance that the financials were reported accurately and fairly. And so we have Michael Ashe, partner with Christie White and Associates here. And then after he comes, we also have Matt Smith, who's the president of our own Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, who would like to make some comments.
Good evening. I just wanted to thank the board for having me here this evening. It's my pleasure to be here. My name is Michael Ashe. I'm a partner with Christie White Associates. We're your independent auditors. Alan, you can tell he's been doing this for a while because he took about half of my presentation with what he just said. Those are the things that I usually cover, so it's great that you have a CBO that can do that. Just real quickly, just wanted to give you just a quick overview of some of the procedures that we do. So we usually visit the district twice a year. This is for the district audit. We'll come out in the spring before the district's books are closed. We'll visit the school sites. We'll look at your ASBs. We'll look at the internal controls at the district office. And then we'll start our state and federal compliance testing that we have to do. And then after the year end closes and the books are closed, we come back in the fall, and then we're looking at more of the financial information, the account balances, the year end activity, finishing up everything that we did from our interim visit. And then all of this gets compiled in this nice audit report, which it's important that these are the district's financial statements. We assist the district in putting this together, making sure that it complies with all of the applicable requirements. But these are the district statements, and what's ours is the opinions and then any audit findings that we might have. Page 80 gives a great summary of all our opinions that we do. Alan talked about the unmodified clean opinion on the financial statements. One thing that we also have to do related to those financial statements, because you're a school district and you have what's called a single audit, we do your audit under what's called Yellow Book. That's government auditing standards. So we're not giving an opinion on your internal controls, but if we do come across anything in our testing that we determine to be an internal control weakness, we do have to report it. Happy to say that we didn't have any this year. We did have an ASB issue in the prior year related to cash receipts, and it's always nice when you come back and the district has implemented an audit finding, because that means that they're really taking it seriously and correcting it in the future years. So no internal control findings this year. Very good. The second opinion is on federal awards. So because you spend over $750,000 in federal money during the year, you get what's called a single audit. And there are compliance requirements that are set by the OMB. There's a certain way that we have to pick the programs that we test. The special education always gets tested here because of the dollar value of it. That's most of your federal dollars. And I'm happy to say unmodified opinion, no issues there. The third opinion we give is on state awards. Because you're a school district, there's a state audit guide that comes out each year with different requirements that we have to look at, everything from your attendance at your school sites to the school accountability report cards that you talked about this evening, instructional minutes. We did have one audit finding related to that, which I'll talk about briefly. It starts on page 83. Because part of the district's LCFF funding is determined upon your free and reduced population and also your English learner population, the state has asked us to look at that and test that. And we did find an issue with the English learner population this year. Hopefully the district has implemented. I know the first window is over, but you still have the amendment window. That's the problem with audit. A lot of times is they're so far, it's in the past, so by the time the district gets this, the next year the same issue may have already occurred, but hopefully the district is able, I know they've communicated to the school sites the importance of getting CELT scores for English learners each year and making sure that those English learners if those English learners need to be reclassified, that they're reclassified into the correct category. So I believe that issue is already remedied. There was a funding impact to the district, which is also included in here. So that's the only audit finding. Really good results overall. The district management is very positive, very good to work with. Just a couple things that I wanted to touch on really quickly. The district has a really strong reserve percentage in the general fund. That's a very important thing. The best indicator of a school district's financial health. Your reserve as of June 30th, 2017 was around 15%. You do have to budget for the STRS PERS increases that are coming, and we know that based on the shortfalls at the STRS and PERS pension level. So that's an issue. I know Alan's probably included that in his multi-year projections, and the district is preparing for that. Not much change this year. There will be a new auditing standard next year. It's called GASB 75. It will impact your other post-employment benefits. It doesn't impact anything with your plan. It just impacts how we have to report the liability and some disclosures in here. So GASB's unfortunately taking a really long audit report and making it even longer. So expect this to be a few pages longer next year, and a change in the way that the OPEB liability is calculated. The district will need to work with us and their actuary to assist with that. And for June. So do you want me to answer questions for the district audit now, or just touch on the bonds really quickly? I was going to touch on those together. It's up to you.
Yep. Yeah, you could go ahead with the bonds.
Okay. And I'm going to take them all three collectively. And Alan already described the reason for the audit. They all three have to have financial and performance audits until all the money is spent. The financial piece, the only difference that's very similar to what we do in the district audit, the difference between the district and the bonds, in the district audit, it all gets rolled into the building fund, Fund 21, whereas each measure has to be tracked separately. So the district has sub-funds, that they have created for each measure, because you can't commingle the funds. You have to make sure to track them. So that's the only thing with the financial audit. The performance piece, I think Alan alluded to, we did test expenditures for all 3 measures this year to determine that they were in accordance with the ballot language. This was a pretty light year. Your older bond, there's not a lot of activity. Your newer bonds, the majority of the costs were planning, architect, bond issuance costs, those types. So once the major construction gets going, that's when we'll start doing our site walk. So I would expect the 17-18 audits to be a lot more, to be a lot more to them. Also, when the district enters into some contracts, we'll also be looking at contracts and certain things like that going forward. So, and this gets presented to your COC, which it did last week, the meeting there, and then also to the board, and it has to be done by March 31st. So, and there were no findings or any issues with any of the 3 bond measures. Okay, so that is all I had. Your reports just get more and more, which is a good problem to have. That's exciting that you have 3 bond measures going at once. It's very exciting for the district. So, are there any questions that I can help answer?
Charlie?
So thank you for the report.
Sure.
Those are great reports. I think the one question I have is, as the accounting board keeps adding requirements for reporting, our position looks worse and worse. Does this play out in terms of credit rating?
Sure. As far as I know, no. I believe everybody's in the same bucket, and the credit rating agencies realize that the district's general fund, like I said, is the best indicator of the financial health. And yes, these standards are crazy. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because GASB 45, which is the OPEB standard, that was just 07, 08. So they took them all the way to 08 to get to 45. They're already up in the 90s now. In the last 10 years, they've more than doubled the standards. So yes, they just keep adding more standards on us and making it more complicated. So, great point.
Any other questions? In the audience.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Matt Smith. I'm the president of the Citizens Oversight Committee for the bond measures. Just to give you an overview of what we do, our charter is to review expenditures and make sure that the money that's committed is spent in the correct areas that it should be spent. So our meetings, we meet quarterly. We've been going through the quarter's expenditures, and as was reported, there's not been a lot of activity, but we've been going through and reviewing line by line as we go. There's been a couple little adjustments we've found, nothing of material value, but we have been working with Alan to correct those and get them in the right buckets so that we are clean across all of these 3 bond buckets. So we have reviewed the audits earlier last week, and we accept all those, and we don't find any disagreement. So we approve from our end, and just wanted to pass that along.
Thank you. Any questions?
Just one last comment. One of the great things about having the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, and particularly our committee, is that we have 4 financial minds and 1 internal auditor on that committee, and so they're able to be that second set of eyes and work with me on ensuring that everything's properly accounted for, and we could be accountable to the community. So it's very good.
I just wanted to thank you for your work, and if you could convey that back to the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, I'd appreciate it. It's great to have you in force and looking at every transaction for us.
Sure, thank you. No, it's a privilege.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Jacob?
I had a brief one. I remember looking at them. I think on all of the committees, we were missing 1 person from a category on all 3 of them, and there was an asterisk saying that we're
It's the retired
actively trying to
Retired
seek.
Association for ours.
Didn't it over? I think it was the same one on. I was just trying to look it up. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Correct.
it was somebody from a taxpayers association.
So we just not.
We could.
We're seeking it, and we're just not getting anybody who's interested, or.
Right. It's fairly typical for school districts and committees to be on the lookout for somebody, but no one really generating interest. One of the good things is that having somebody from a bona fide tax organization, it doesn't need to be a tax organization within Albany, and so it's more broader, but it's still difficult to find.
Thank you.
Well, and one comment on that, we did, that actually came up in our last meeting, and there was, one of our members was pretty impassioned about, we need to fill this spot. We need to get somebody on here. So I'll push on that on our next, and I'll have some direct conversation to see if we can have them explore a little bit. She was so empowered. She's like, I don't know what it takes, but maybe we should start something. so Alan and I will bring that back to our next meeting. Thank you. Sure.
Thanks. Okay, I don't, Kim stepped out, but
Thanks.
should we wait a minute to take a vote on this? She comes back?
Meanwhile, we can talk about starting a taxpayers association.
Yes, bona fide.
Bona fide.
I don't know if the association has to be bona fide or the taxpayers have to be bona fide.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. Well, we can defer the vote and
Well, actually, while we're waiting, maybe we should get clear. Do we need to do these like individual votes, or can we put a motion forward to approve all four?
we can put a motion forward to approve all four.
Okay.
We can do that and then vote when Kim gets back.
Yeah, yeah.
Are
Okay, so I will.
Oh, they would be to accept the audit reports. Yep.
Okay. So the motion would be, okay.
Just defer it then, or can we?
Let's defer it and go on to the next one. When she
Yeah.
comes back, we can have our vote. So we have our motion and our second?
Oh, finish your motion.
So the motion would be to accept all four of the audit reports.
I second that.
Okay, so we'll take a vote on that when Richard Tain returns. Let's hear about the independent contractor agreement with SVA for furniture and equipment specifications.
Great. So this is an independent contractor agreement with SVA Architects for furniture and equipment specifications for the Albany Middle School Annex. SVA Architects is the architect of record for the Albany Middle School Annex, which is currently in construction. The reason for the agreement is because we're looking at potentially spending upwards of $400,000 on furniture and equipment for the entire campus. And what we want to do is ensure that the furniture and equipment that we purchase is meets the needs of the staff, both currently as well as long term. And with all the new things going on with what's called 21st century learning, all these different types of furniture, we want to get a specialist involved that knows not only the furniture side, but also the teaching side, and how all that can work best with the Albany Middle School Annex. The great thing about having SVA Architects do it is that they aren't connected to any furniture vendor, and so we're able to. So the deliverable that we will receive is a bid package that would be available for any vendor to bid on, and that'll help drive costs down. The architect will work with a team that's assembled of the middle school staff and principal in order to really work through what teaching will look like for the middle school annex. And so I recommend that we move forward with this agreement.
Okay, so we'll get back to this in just a minute now that Member Dutain is back with us. We have a motion and a second to accept all four audit reports. We stalled the vote until you got back. So all in favor of accepting all four audit reports, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Now get back to the SVA. I know that you got, thank you for coming.
Thanks.
I know that you got some questions from board members offline, and be good to answer some of them in public. On the face of it, this is $20,000 to somebody to help us pick furniture. It seems, it sounds like a lot of money, but you had some very good reasons for why it couldn't just be a teachers committee, why we wanted to hire somebody to do this. Can you explain why this is a financially reasonable thing to do?
Sure. So it absolutely will be $20,000 that is... So it is a contract for $20,000. This is work that would begin soon and through receipt and delivery of the furniture. Most of the work would be with the middle school staff committee that's assembled in order to help talk about what teaching and learning would look like for the middle school annex, and develop a bid package that would be that would allow competition for the furniture. We anticipate by going through this process that we would be spending essentially be spending 5% of what we will pay for furniture in order to generate at least 15% in savings. And the main thing about it is that with furniture, the furniture vendors, once they deliver the furniture, they're saying, that's yours, and there's no way to return it if, something's the wrong size or something. So we're able to specify what the furniture is, the sizes, the materials, the lengths, and ensure that it works best now and long term.
Do you have any questions? Jacob?
So yeah, where do you come up with the figure that it'll be a 15% saving for the 5% investment?
It's mainly for how bids typically generate savings for furniture type equipment. So it's mainly like an industry type statistic.
It's an estimate or a guess. It's
Correct.
no hardcore.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Questions or comments from the audience?
I guess I want to ask about how the classroom furniture pilots have been going. I understand that there were difficulties with trying to order directly from the furniture manufacturers, and schools couldn't buy directly from them, and then you had to find a middleman that would put through the orders, and there were delays, and you're hoping that some of those type of issues can be addressed by getting SVA Architects to run the bid process and get these things aligned.
Correct.
But it sounds like we do have 2 classrooms of furniture. Are you preparing a report on how the teachers like those so far? Are we going to hear about that, or?
The good thing is that the 2 teachers who have the pilot furniture will be a part of the committee that helps assemble the furniture, or that helps select the type of furniture for the annex. And so I'll be able to speak with them and really see how things are going. This has unfortunately been a very enlightening process for me as far as ordering furniture, because from the beginning, it just seemed very easy that I could go through a catalog. I want this furniture, and then use their order form and receive it. And it was significantly more difficult than what I assumed. And so, by having the specialist come in, that'll help streamline the process and ensure that by the time we open in early 2019, we'll have furniture ready.
Thank you.
Anything else? Charlie?
Yeah, I wonder if you could tell us more about what the bid documents are going to look like. Are they going to have a set of specs as to what the furniture has to do, or will they have a set of specs that describes the furniture exactly? or will they have a contract cost limit, or will it be some combination of the above?
It'll be a combination where it'll require what the furniture needs to do, but develop it in a way so that multiple vendors can bid on the package. One of the things that that these furniture vendors try to do is they try to specialize something that's theirs so that it makes it more difficult for us to get competitive pricing. But based on how they can structure it, we'll be able to generate the savings through the competition.
Jacob?
Yeah, when I was going through it, I just might have missed something in the past, but I see how we have our standard contract at the beginning, and then they have their contract in here too. There's two different things we're signing. Is that common? Because I don't remember seeing that in the past where, you know, ours with the fingerprinting and the TB and all that, and then there's theirs. It's the same, essentially saying the same thing, but
So it's. I included that in there mainly because it's more of a well, the initial document noted the scope of work that they would be providing in greater detail, and then the subsequent page that had terms and conditions, the terms and conditions were either in line or better than our standard contract, and so that's why I didn't feel the need to change it or anything like that.
Anything else? We have a motion to approve the independent contractor agreement with SVA for furniture and equipment specifications. Anyone care to make a motion?
Yeah, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Now we have an amendment to DVA agreement to provide CHPS's collaboration for high-performing schools. Is that right? Commissioning agent services for the Albany Middle School Annex project.
Thanks. So this is an amendment to Derivi Castellanos Architects. They're our program manager. This specific amendment is in line with Board Policy 3510, Green School Operations, as well as the Board Resolution on Sustainability and Design and Construction for High-Performance Schools. What CHPS stands for is the Collaborative for High Performing Schools. This is a national joint effort of industry leaders who developed best practices on how to ensure long-term sustainable and optimal learning environments. And with the development of the Integrated Design and Sustainability Committee, we felt like this framework was the best use of our public bond dollars and ensure that long-term we'll be able to provide optimal learning environments. One of the things that the Collaborative for High-Performing Schools requires is that there's a third party that does this commissioning work. And so essentially they would be going through the project and ensuring that what's installed meets all the testing requirements and performs as we intend it to be. And the other thing that they would do is go back a year after the campus is in operation, just to ensure that it is still maintained, that it is still in operation as intended. One of the other good things about the Collaborative for High Performing Schools framework is that they know it's not just architects and contractors and engineers that do the work, and then once it's built, then everybody walks away. They require a training manual so that our custodial and maintenance staff who are going to be in the building every day, that they know how to operate all the machines and know how to make it work and things like that. And so with that, I would recommend the amendment with Derby Castellanos Architects for commissioning agent services for the middle school project.
Any questions? Charlie?
Well, this is just a comment. I just wanted to say that one of the things I've learned over time is that commissioning is one of the most important things you can do with new projects. You can put in the best systems, but if you don't test them before you drive the vehicle off the parking lot, so to speak, those systems may not work. And so this is money well spent.
Thanks. Okay, anyone else? Okay. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve it.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now we have an amendment to Derby Castellanos Architects agreement to provide project management services for the Albany High School Classroom Addition project.
Thank you. I'm going to turn this one also over to our Chief Business Official, Mr. Gard.
Thank you, Superintendent Williams. And so as we move forward with the with our next project after the Albany Middle School Annex, which is the Albany High School Classroom Addition, we want to utilize project management services for the Albany High School Addition in order to ensure that this upcoming project becomes a hallmark for the campus and the community, just like the Albany Aquatic Center is and what the Albany Middle School Annex will be. One of the great things about the firm and providing project management services is that they're able to work with the contractor and the architect, and as well as the they also have the technical knowledge to work with the contractor and the architect, but also the soft skills to work with the community groups and meetings, and in order to help ensure that the project stays on schedule, that we're ensuring every dollar is well spent, and that our end product is something that is needed, valued, and usable.
Comments or questions? Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll motion that we approve this contract.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And also for the high school classroom addition project, amendment to the bridging architectural service agreement with Gould Evans.
Thank you. I'm going to turn this over. Actually, if it please the board, items 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 will be presented by our Chief Business Official. Mr. Gard.
Thanks. So this is an amendment to the Bridging Architectural Services Agreement with Gould Evans for the Albany High School Classroom Addition. Gould Evans provided bridging architect services about a year and a half ago for the initial design of the Albany High School project, and because that was prior to the bond measures passing, we did not incorporate this this scope into the original contract. And so with the bond measures passing and us moving forward with the Albany High School addition, we're adding this scope to the contract. And so I recommend that. And so the value of having a bridging architect is that they're able to be part of the process. They they led the process in 2016 with the core group of high school staff to really develop the vision for the Albany High School Classroom Addition. The services that they would provide is ensuring that the contractor and new architect hold to that vision and priorities, and they would provide services up through the development of the construction documents. So it's essentially right before submission to the Division of State Architect.
Questions?
I just have a comment, which is in the process that we're going through now, bidding out the high school project. I have been privileged to sit in on a set of those interviews, and two of the contractors bidding on the project independently mentioned how excellent the bridging documents were that Gould Evans has provided, and how they hadn't seen work of that quality rarely. So I am pleased to motion that we accept this contract.
Thank you. Kelly?
I just wanted to add a comment, and that is that I also have sat in on one of the two meetings we've had so far, and I found the presence of the bridging architect to be invaluable, considering that we have 3 design build firms that are proposing, and 2 of those represent significant departures from the bridging documents. I found it very, very helpful to have the bridging architect present.
Thanks. So is that a second?
So yeah, that could be a second.
Okay. All in favor of approving this contract, say aye.
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 Thank you. Now we have connectivity for our schools, and these are in pairs. First, we have to pass a resolution authorizing procurement, and then we have to actually pass the agreement for the procurement.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure.
Question?
Yeah, just real quick before, do we need to do a resolution for a contract that we're going to approve?
Yes, for this particular instance, yes.
And why?
I'll be able to get into it. So essentially, the public contract code requires that the board approve a method for purchasing technology equipment of this sort. And it's not essentially that that the board has to approve us going out to bid. It's that they approve going out to bid with with technology equipment being so highly specialized and technical, it's best that the low bid does not is not the sole reason for selecting a vendor. The price of the bid is a significant part of what determines who gets selected, but it shouldn't be the only part because of the reliability of the equipment, the follow through, and the support that is being offered. And so what the public contract code says is that if you deviate from the low bid process for technology equipment, then it's something that I would need to bring to the board so that the board is aware that we're deviating from that process.
Did that answer your question? Okay. I do want to comment that for both resolutions, there was a place in the resolution, probably boilerplate, which was a space to put in the name of the district. It said district in brackets, and the name of the district will, in fact, be put into these resolutions.
Yes.
Rather than what you see in the board packet. Any other comments or questions on this resolution, Charlie?
Yeah. So this contract I'm having a little trouble with, and I'm hoping.
We're still on the resolution. Do you want to?
Well, it's 9 and 10 go together, right? I mean, resolution and agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, without the contract, the resolution is irrelevant. So.
True. Okay, go ahead.
So I'm commenting, I guess, on both the resolution and the contract. Maybe somebody can explain it to me. I know technology changes quickly, but the fact that we're replacing a system that was put in place less than 5 years ago.
Ancient. It was designed by dinosaurs.
Yeah, I know that. So we're spending $100,000 to do this, and I don't know the lifetime. It sounds like it's going to be another 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and we'll be doing the same thing again. So I'm just having a little trouble with this one.
Sure. So, the current, so this is for the purchase of wireless access points for the school district that allows us to, that allows the computers, laptops throughout the schools and school district to access the internet. The reason for the upgrade is we've been prolonging the purchase of upgrading our system for the a few years now, in order to wait until there's a new system that is kind of like the new standard. And so the way I think of it, it's similar to like purchasing the iPhone 6 and then not waiting until the iPhone 6S comes out, but waiting until the iPhone 7 comes out. So something that'll be significantly different and like the new standard. The one of the other reasons for the upgrade is because the new buildings won't be able to use this the old system, because the old system doesn't have the capability or functionality to add the new technology requirements. And so it is potentially $100,000. However, we are going through what's called a E-rate process, which is a program that is operated by the federal government in order to reduce costs on technology-related equipment. And so we could potentially save upwards of 20 to 30% on the contract. So it would. So instead of 100,000, it would be closer to 70 or 80. And this is something that has been planned for the past 2 years, and so it's a part of the technology budget for the year.
So it's already included in the technology budget?
Correct.
Charlie?
So I still have questions. I'm pretty
Sure.
happy with my iPhone 6, actually. I have a 6, yeah. And I haven't upgraded, and it's been okay. But tell me more about where we are. If our current technology is iPhone 6, is the new technology 7 or 8? And then what happens in a year? I mean, the new buildings don't come online till 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So are we buying something now that's going to be outmoded by the time the new buildings come online?
No. Oh. Okay. Okay. Because this is we're not purchasing equipment just because it's the new standard. We're purchasing it because it's the new standard that would allow us to operate one system with the new buildings. And so there definitely will be new wireless access points that come online a year from now, 2 years from now, but the reason it's new is not the driver of purchasing the equipment. It's to ensure that we are able to bring the new buildings online and ensure that as the technology demands increase, that our base system allows for that growth.
Just a couple questions of clarification right now. So we're talking about upgrading the wireless kind of stuff in the existing buildings or the new buildings?
Both.
Both, okay. And it seems that we're updating these systems so both systems match each other so they can kind of coexist. What kind of benefits do we get with this new system? Like, what upgrades do we get? Do we get faster connection? Could you elaborate on that?
Yes. We would receive faster connections. Let's see, we currently have 130 wireless access points throughout the school district. This new system would allow us to, let's see. This new system would allow us to manage access to the internet faster. It would allow more devices to be online at the same time than our current system, and let's see. And the other thing that it'll do is that it would provide one system for both the current and new buildings, so that it would be more effectively managed in case of outages or disruptions or things like that.
Okay, and then just quickly snowballing off of what you said, you mentioned the new system would support more devices. Does the current system we have support the devices that AUSD currently owns, or are we looking into expanding the number of devices we have?
Sorry, could you?
Absolutely, yeah.
Sure, sorry.
You mentioned that the new system would support more devices being online, such
Yes.
as Chromebooks, things of that nature. Does the current system we have currently support the number of Chromebooks and those kind of devices that we have, or are we going to expand our size?
Yes. So our current system supports the current number of devices that we have, but it does not allow additional wireless access points to be added. So if there are dark areas, if we want to expand to Cougar Field because of some activities going on, we won't have the capacity to do that because of the current system.
All right, thank you.
Ross?
Just to a point, we're sort of debating a purchase of something where we haven't got much idea at all, really, of what all's out there. And I would really love, I think, the board to get a presentation from DAX or from the administration on the state of tech in AUSD. I attended a couple of sessions at the last CSBA conference we attended when it was last year in San Francisco to hear about some of the districts, so that they're, say, provisioning the schools with wireless to allow 3 devices per person on the campuses, on the thought that you've got an iPad, you've got your phone, you want to have connectivity for this, that, and the other. When we talk about the WAN services, apparently the FCC standard for campus for school connectivity K-12 is going to be, as of 18-19 school year, 1 megabit per second per student. We will come up short in the thing we approve, though there's room to grow, certainly. There was a nationwide survey called something like Stand Up. DAX has received that. I'd be interested in having, say, a presentation on that as well, because it's talking about the applications being used in the schools and a lot of survey data, including from here. We were participants. There are, I think, several thousand respondents from AUSD, so we can actually get a snapshot of who's using technology for what at the various levels. It really can't, I wouldn't put off this vote tonight on this, but I think we absolutely should know a lot more about the prevalence of tech in the schools, what we're able to do, and where we think we'll need to grow.
Okay, so that's a request for agendizing a staff report.
I would second that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Vin?
Oh, no, I was just going to say that I definitely agree with Ross. I think in terms of technology in schools, I think it's always kind of advancing. And so with the amount of, cost this is going to be, I would rather look at some more options and just kind of evaluate the field before we start making decisions. And so maybe agendizing that would definitely help with those decisions.
Right, Jacob?
Yeah, I have an issue with this, and I brought it up before to Val, not at a board meeting, but just between me and her about asking us to approve stuff after it looks like it's already basically been done. On the cover page, it talks about that bids were due on December 11th, and then now all of a sudden it's just being brought to us to vote on it, and then we're going to ask for a staff report after we've already approved something. It should be, the staff report should be before, and then we decide, in my opinion, if we're going to approve something. And I brought this up to Val before, and I thought that we were kind of under some kind of agreement that this wasn't going to happen. And I'm seeing it happen again for a much larger amount.
Yeah, this is definitely my oversight. I was not aware of the public contract code where we needed permission prior to conducting the bid process. Typically with other contracts, we would go through a bid process and then bring that to the board, then walk through what the bid process was. But the public contract code specifically requires that the board approve the process before before taking action. So it's definitely on my
If
my
you've
part.
accepted bids and you've already decided who you wanted to go with, you've basically already done everything. Now you just need our approval to move to the next step. And I think that we should have been involved in this process a lot earlier. A couple good questions were brought up, and it's like, okay, well, we're going to vote on it, and then later on we'll get our questions answered. The answers to the questions might change how people vote. So, I don't know. I guess I will make a motion if it's possible. I don't know if it's the right procedure, but to table this until we get more information.
Can we ask what would happen if we tabled it?
We would need to apply for E-rate funding next month. And so if it is tabled, we would need to bring it back at a future board meeting in order to apply for E-rate funding.
Okay, is that going to be possible? We have time at a future board meeting? It looks to me like we could pass the resolutions tonight, which is not passing the contract. It's just agreeing on the method of getting bids, and then
I'm sorry, I disagree with the method, the way that things were done.
Yeah, no, I understand, but the resolution is necessary before we can even ask for bids. Theoretically, is that right? So even if we were to go back and redo it, we still need to pass the resolution first.
The oversight was on our part because we didn't know about the code that required us to actually do that.
Charlie?
So I'm thinking that I kind of have the same sense that you articulated, Jacob, that what Ross described would be helpful to me is to have the staff report first so that I better understand the dimensions of the system, what it is we have now, what it is we're getting, why we're getting it. For me, that's maybe the first step and the most informative. Having said that, I would be reluctant to lose the possibility of the E-rate funding. I don't want to do that, and if we need to get the resolutions done tonight so that we can stay on track to get the E-rate funding, I'm certainly willing to do that.
Yeah, I think passing the resolutions does not require us to pass any contract. It just gives us the option of moving forward. Does that make sense, Jay?
Yeah, it just still should have been done forward. I mean, this has happened quite a few times, and then basically what it does, it puts us in a position that, oh, this is just my personal opinion, that we didn't do things properly, and now we're running up against a deadline. So now we're just jamming it on you. And because we don't want to lose this, and this, go ahead and pass it. And it needs to stop where things are not being done properly. And then because of a timeline, it reminds me with the resolution to the county, which it really wasn't even a set timeline. It was kind of something that you just decided to make as a timeline. So we can go on with the vote, but I'm not going to vote yes for either. It's just business shouldn't be done like this. And it's not the first time.
Okay, I think we should go ahead and see if we can get a motion for the resolution, and then we can take your motion to table the agreement next. So do we have a motion on the resolution 2017-1809 authorizing us to go ahead with a process that we don't actually have to complete, but at least we have the authorization to do it if we want to.
Yeah, I move we approve Resolution 2017-1809.
Okay, do we have a second on that?
I second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now we have a motion to table the agreement with CDWG for procurement of wireless access points to be brought back, hopefully in time to get the E-rate funding. Jacob?
Just one quick question, too. If the school is not going to be done for over a year, why is this timeline even, I mean, when does it expire? And if we miss this deadline, I mean, are we still not eligible to get it? You know, it just seems rushed.
Sure. It's essentially driven by the E-rate process, and so we would need to apply for E-rate funding next month in order to be in the pool to potentially receive E-rate funding for next year. The concern about waiting until next year, until when we're, until the building is almost complete or in operation, is that there's a lot of infrastructure work that we need to do while the building is under construction. I have one suggestion. If would it be possible to provide information about our district technology system in a Friday update or subsequent Friday updates, because there are, in order to provide that information?
Expedite the process. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, the more information, the sooner the better.
Sure.
And I'm happy to have a sort of a more general discussion, because among the issues I'd like to throw in there too is how we collaborate, say, with the library, because the Albany Library not only provides laptops as a loaning thing, now is giving out wireless access points. I mean, you can go and get a wireless access point from the Alameda County Library for 3 weeks for free.
Nice.
They have a deal with AT&T Wireless, they basically, and then the city, because I know Nick Pilch, among others, is interested in access generally, and we have an awful lot of students who do an awful lot of things not on premises. If you're down at the library, are you afforded enough access? Should we talk to the library about that? In Coachella Valley Unified, they have an arrangement with cafes and other retailers in the area collaborating with the schools. The school highlights them as sources for student access to the internet, and they guarantee certain constraints on student access to the internet. So I'd love to have a big discussion, and I think a Friday update statement, Dax, I'm sure, can tell us an awful lot about why evergreening is good, but why now? Good question.
Okay, so Charlie.
And I have one more question I'd like to throw in there, and that is, are we generating 130 pieces of e-waste? And is there a market for the old wireless access points?
Okay, well, let's get that answer. Okay, so we have a motion to table. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion? All in favor of tabling this agreement, say aye.
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 Okay, and we have the same situation?
That's what
Or is it different with the next resolution and agreement?
I would object on the same grounds, but as far as the resolution, if that needs to proceed or proceeded.
Charlie?
Well, I want to ask Jacob, I didn't have quite the same response to this one. I wanted just to ask what you thought. Basically, this agreement seems to me to essentially be a continuation of our current contract. They've gone through a process, and in fact, the current contract is the low bidder. It's basically like our current contract has been sent out for audit, and it turns out that it's the best we can do. So I didn't have quite the same concern about this one. I think I could probably go ahead with this one.
It's about the timing again. I'm trying to find the actual page, but
361.
RFP or whatever, the last one was December 11th, and now we're seeing it now. Well, this one was, would you say 361?
I think 361.
Is the 361 is the resolution.
397 is the agreement.
Sorry. Yeah, it's saying bids were due on November 9th, 2017. So it's the same thing as far as just going along with business and then after the fact. So that would be the same.
All right, so let's start with the resolution. Do we have a motion to approve the resolution 2017-1810?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, so I believe Jacob is moving to table the agreement with Sunny Sis.
Well, I would want to know, since this one is a service agreement and not an equipment purchase, it's kind of like saying we won't swap out all our light bulbs just yet, but we do want PG&E to keep the power on. So I'd love to know when we, the board, will have had to have made a decision not to have an interruption in this contract or have a new vendor, new provider for this contract.
The contract with Synesis does not terminate until November of this year, but it's similar to the last agreement regarding E-rate funding. And so, yeah.
Okay, so we could bring it back at the same time as the other one. All right, so we have a motion to table. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Kim, you look like you have a question.
I just wanted to double check with Alan that with what we're doing tonight, passing the resolutions and tabling the contracts, you will be able to go forward with getting us the cheapest rate funding possible and getting that all set up and ready for next year?
It would not occur until approval of the contracts. And so with the E-rate applications, we would need to have the vendor, what's being provided, and that sort of thing. So if we're able to bring it to
we have meetings
board
next
meeting?
month on the 13th and the 27th. And given that it's February, if we were to do it on the 27th, that would not leave you very much time. Yeah. So we really need to see these then on February 13th to make a decision.
Jacob?
Yeah, and I'm just bringing this up again as far as the second one that I'm asking to table is just to kind of try to make a point, because now it seems like we have to do this again, right? Because now we're tabling it and then we have to do it again. And it's like, had it been done the way I thought it should have been done before, this wouldn't be happening.
Correct.
So hopefully it can be kind of remembered that if something like this happens again, I'm going to probably do the same thing, because I don't like basically us not being part of the discussion and all that, and just, okay, here, go ahead and vote. So
Okay, do we-
Agreed upon, and we won't have the issue again now that we understand what the state code is.
Okay, do we have a second on the motion to table?
we had one, I thought.
I'll second that motion as well.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that concludes the review and action items. Brings us to review and discussion, which starts with a report on the governor's budget proposal.
Thank you. I'm going to turn this over to Alan Gard, who is very busy tonight, and hopefully will give us some good news.
Great.
Mr. Gard.
Thank you, Superintendent Williams. So tonight we're going to provide an update on the what's called the governor's budget proposal. This is essentially the first step in the state process. Even with the beginning of this process, there is good news. However, the good news still has our budget out of line. And so instead of holding everybody in suspense, I'm just going to cut to the chase. So Last month, I brought forward what was called the first interim financial report. The first interim financial report is a quarterly financial update to the school board about our finances. And tonight, I'm bringing forward what the potential impact is on the governor's proposal. The governor released his proposal on January 10th. However, one of the big caveats is that it did not incorporate any potential impacts to the federal tax plan that was approved late in December. And so what the impact of the governor's proposal is for Albany is that he's planning to fully implement what's called the local control funding formula. The local control funding formula is a new formula that began in 2013-14, but because the state didn't have enough money to fully implement it at that time, they developed a long-term plan to, over time, phase it in. With the projections that the state developed, they now have enough money to fully implement this funding formula. The impact for next year is an increase in revenues of $1.6 million. Most of that is coming from what's called one-time funding. We have received one-time funding from the state for the past 5 years. However, it's not the same amount of one-time funding each year, and sometimes the state requires different expenditure requirements for that funding. But he's proposing one-time funding of close to $1.1 million for Albany with no strings attached. So there isn't any requirement that we spend it on A, B, C, or D. And with the full implementation of LCFF, that is why there are increases in 2019-20 and 2021, because that was the because 2021 was the original projection for full funding. And so even with all this great news, we still have a annual shortfall. The shortfall is significantly reduced for next year. However, the subsequent years, it's still averaging about $1.9 to $2 million. And I should also note that 2021-22 is the last year of what's called Measure LL parcel tax that was passed by the community in 2014. And that currently generates about $1.5 million for specific programs. And so...
Do you want to ask a question?
Would I interrupt your train too much if
Sure.
I asked you a question about what you just said?
Sure.
So when I look at the numbers up there, 1.6 million is what's coming in next year, of which 1.1 is one time, and then 0.5 is ongoing. And so is the 0.5 that I see for 2019-2020 the ongoing part?
It's essentially the difference between what was projected last month and what the impact is with the first interim. So the 0.5 million, so the 500,000 for 1920 is ongoing revenues.
And it's the ongoing part of what we got in the 1.6 million? Is that right, or?
It is.
It's not right. I can see that. While you're thinking about that, so
Sure.
where I'm getting confused here is that my understanding is 1.6 million represents 1.1 of one time and 0.5 of ongoing. So I would expect to see the ongoing part show up in the 2019-2020 budget, and I'd also expect it to show up in the 2020-21 budget because it's ongoing.
Except that this is really saying unexpected income, because we're expecting LCFF to be
Yes.
fully funded a couple more years out. They are kind of jumping the gun and funding it earlier. So
it was already in the budget because it was projected for a later year.
Yes.
Okay. And so basically what I see in this set of tables is that if I look at the tables in the upper right, compare them to the tables in the lower left has got revenues that have been incremented by the dollar amounts that you show there in the larger
Correct.
print.
Correct.
And so that's basically the net effect of all the changes that we hadn't previously accounted for.
Correct.
Thank you.
And all this and so with the first interim report, it showed, a very dark and gloomy forecast. And with the governor's budget proposal, it's getting a little brighter. And so that is why I typically get called the boy who cried wolf, because with the state essentially provides 80% of our funding, and with the roller coaster that they have with their budgeting process, it's hard to really determine what we can count on. And so our county office, which provides financial oversight over school districts, forces our financials and our projections to tie to the latest state projections. And so just a quick reminder that we're still in the beginning stages of the state budget process. And so the real impact will be when the state adopts their 2018-19 budget in late June. But I'll provide a update but the state will provide an update in May in what's called the May revise. And so between now and then, the governor will be working with the state legislators, talking about his proposal and seeing where his priorities either do or don't line up with the legislators' priorities. Our budget is not stable, even with the good news from the state. And the volatility right now is good, but there's also times where it could be bad. And so this is the last year of Governor Brown's term. And essentially what he's doing is he's warning the next governor that if you spend too much, then you'll have to raise taxes or you'll have to reduce expenditures. And so what he's done is he's created this piggy bank. It's called the Rainy Day Fund. And if the governor's proposal is adopted as laid out, then there would be $13.5 billion in the Rainy Day Fund for the state. However, $13.5 billion is a significant amount of money, but with just a modest recession, $60 billion would be wiped out over a 3-year period. And so, as I mentioned before, the federal tax plan is not incorporated in his budget, and he's focused on building reserves and fully implementing the local control funding formula for the state. And he's trying to essentially just make it easier for the next governor to come in and make decisions. And so 2018 is an election year, and so one of the things to keep in mind is that the legislators are focused on the money that's in the piggy bank, as well as what's not in the governor's budget proposal. And so what's not in the governor's budget proposal is there is significant anticipation that in May there will be even greater news coming from the state because of short-term benefits from the federal tax plan, as well as what's called the Children's Health Insurance Program. And so yesterday, the federal shutdown ended, and it ended with an agreement that the Children's Health Insurance Program would be extended for 6 years. What that means for California is that it would be an additional $750 million for the state's upcoming budget. However, that's not really for education, because education is driven by a calculation that provides a minimum amount for education. And so what the state legislators are trying to do is they're going to look at the piggy bank and the reserve and say, we don't need that much reserve. There's opportunities to better balance reserves and current needs that are going on across the state. There's First Five, which handles preschool programs across the state, and the need to improve those programs and expand access to more families. There's push from the higher education community wanting additional state funds in order to mitigate the potential of increasing tuition fees for our college students. There was recently news that the California State University programs are completely maxed out, and so they're actually turning away residents of California, which hasn't happened before. Let's see what else is going on. So there's career tech ed and ensuring that our students are properly prepared for the workplace, and so trying to develop funds for that will be important. And even with the additional money that the state has provided, even with the full implementation of LCFF, we're still in the bottom 50 across the states, and so there's push to not only change how the money is spent on education, but significantly increase the money that is provided for education. And so all that's going on, and the California Teachers Association, I think they put it best by saying, just stick to your legacy, stick to your priorities, and that's just a clear message to provide funding for education. So it's very succinct, and I like it. So let's see. So what can we count on with this governor's proposal? So there's we're still in the beginning stages of the state budget process. Here's essentially some of the outlines that could impact Albany. And so these are the things that we could count on. We can count on the full implementation of LCFF. The Strong Workforce Program is proposed in order to help maintain and increase career tech ed programs. The caveat is that it's actually funding that goes to the community colleges, and so school districts would need to build stronger relationships with the community colleges to then align programs that we offer with programs at the community college level. Over the past few years, there's been focus on what's called special education local plan areas, which are regionalized oversight of special education services. And so there's some recommendations to have the SELPAs align programs and services with what school districts are doing. And there's definitely investments to help upgrade the state accountability system so that things like the state dashboard becomes more accessible and robust. One things that we should monitor are the two yellow items. So I do anticipate additional funding coming in in May, as well as when the state actually adopts their budget in June. However, whether that becomes one-time funding of $1 million for Albany that we can spend on anything we want, or if it's $2 million on a specific program, or $200,000 on whatever. I think just monitoring this aspect will be prudent. The other thing is the state facilities bond. The state facilities bond was passed in November 2016. Which did not have a lot of support from the governor, and so he's implemented a lot of accountability measures in order to strengthen the state facilities bond program. The proposal announces that it would plan to issue $640 million. That would essentially cover programs that were already approved 5 years ago. But if there is more push for more of an issuance, then that could be something that we can monitor and potentially benefit from. One of the clear things about the governor's budget proposal is that it's assuming that there's no recession for the next 4 years. What that means is literally the longest period of economic expansion in the state's history. And so that's something that I don't think we can count on, and we would just need to be mindful of. And so one of the things that the governor keeps reminding everybody is that the state has a pattern of going through a recession every 7 years based on the significant dependence on high-income earners and a healthy stock market. And so this is just a chart of what we've done since 2014 when the superintendent and I came on board in order to just help better prepare for the eventual recession. And so just reminding everybody, the bottom left chart is our updated financials. It'll be formally brought to the board in March in what's called the second interim, which is the quarterly update of our financials. And I just like that cartoon. So March 13th, I'll bring forward the second interim financial report. May 10 is when it will be a key date on what the May revise will be. And then in June, I'll bring forward the budget for 18-19.
Thanks. Questions, comments from the board? Jacob?
See, I just want to make sure I'm understanding clearly you talked about one-time money and the difference between ongoing money. I'm sure the whole board received it, but we got an email from California School Board Association back on January 10th. And if I'm looking at it right, it says, I know each district might vary a little bit, but the increase is $465 per student. Does that sound in the ballpark?
I know the one-time funding is $295 per student, and so I'm assuming the difference is what they calculated for LCFF.
So that $465 is not all ongoing money, you're saying?
I believe the net is what would be ongoing. So
not the 460.
So the 465 is I didn't see that document, but I believe what they're referring to is $465 per student, 295 of which is related to one-time funding, and so the remaining $170 per student would be the impact of LCFF.
All right, because to me, if they're going to increase the spending ahead of time to fully implement LCFF, that money is ongoing money. So
Correct.
I'm not seeing it as one time. So what I did is I just took the $465 and times it, not exact number, just I did the math
Sure.
real quick, but about 3,700 students, and it comes to $1.7 million. So if that's ongoing money that we will be receiving, then how is it? Can you explain how it's not? If we're getting $465 per student extra?
Because when they said that they're counting up both ongoing and one time. It's the
You know that?
It matches the numbers we've seen in the presentation here.
It said that we were receiving,
For the next school year? I mean, if that's the case,
it said prior the state was getting 78.3 billion with an increase of 3.1 billion. So that money is there ongoing.
no, there's nothing to say that that's necessarily ongoing. They're saying, you've got 78 billion to the schools in this year, but it's going to change, it'll go to 81. It doesn't say whether or not that a $3 billion increase is.
But if it stays at 81, which was
If it
his
stays at
goal,
81,
then it's $1.7 million per every single year.
But that's not necessarily what's being said. If I say I'm going to give you 81 billion for the next year, and I don't tell you, well, incidentally, the fully funding LCFF brings you to 79.5 billion, and we're also giving you some more one-time money. So it sounds like that to me, that whatever number you're seeing as here's the money next year does include one-time money. It's not necessarily what we're going to get ever after.
Well, we can talk about this more in depth later, because as far as originally with the whole budget cuts, we were hovering around 3 million total in the long term, right? If we've already cut the 1.2, that leaves us at 1.8. So I would like my math to be right. It doesn't mean it is. But the way I'm looking at it, I'm seeing an extra 1.7 million, which would almost get us somewhat back to even if that money continues to flow in every year. I understand it's not a guarantee that it's going to come in every year, but when they say a student's getting this much money and we're increasing it by this much, that's not one-time money. But we could talk more about it. We'll have more discussions about it, and I'll find out and do a little more research on my own.
Great.
But it's obviously additional money that we need to make sure and to kind of look at stuff positively. I understand you're the business guy. You have to be, very cautious, but to me, it's an increase in money, and we have to acknowledge that.
Yes, absolutely.
Charlie?
So could we look at the previous slide? So I think the key point to note here is that with your new budget projections down there in that lower left panel, we now have positive certification for the current period, and then as we adopt next year's budget, we will have every reason to think we'll have a positive certification, looking at columns 2, 3, and 4 there. That's all great news, and I think that that's probably the important part of the message right here. There is one footnote to this. Last December 5th, I guess, we talked about trying to cobble together a short-term solution to make sure we had a positive certification, and that included moving money from Fund 17 into the general fund. And I'm feeling a lot different about that right now. It was a necessary in order for us to see a positive certification, but we see a positive certification here without moving money from Fund 17.
Well, excuse me, Charlie, does this chart include that move from
It
Fund 17?
maintains that.
So that's already in.
That's in there, but since that was just once, right? I mean, or does that include decimating Fund 17 over a 3-year period?
Over a 3-year period.
So that's something I guess I'd like to ask that we look at again then. With new state money coming in, do we really need to decimate Fund 17? That money was for career technical education. We might actually want to use it for career technical education, or maybe not. But I think the circumstances under which that discussion took place December 5th are now clearly different, and it's worth talking about.
Ms. Fujiwara, did you want to comment?
Good evening. I just have a question for Alan about the audited actuals for last year that are on page 161 of the packet. and it shows the district not running a deficit, but having a surplus of $332,000. And I was just wondering the explanation for that, why there is that discrepancy when we say we're in deficit spending.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Would I be able to look at that and email an answer to you? I don't have it off the top of my head, but I'll have to look at it. Cool. Thanks.
Really?
Maybe I could offer a response too, and that is that the deficit spending is over a multi-year period, and interestingly enough, last year's budget was balanced. But I think Alan gave us the answer earlier when he told us that over the past 5 years, we've had a series of grants, if you want to call them that, from the state, one-time funding that has allowed us to maintain a balance between revenues and expenditures, but it's never been ongoing commitments. Each year it has come in. So last year we did actually have a balanced budget, but it was due to that one-time funding. That's what I remember.
Mr. Naif, did you want to speak?
I did have one more question for Alan, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to clarify a chart you had that was the, what have we done to prepare for the recession?
Yep.
On page 433.
Mm-hmm.
So the question I had was, as you go across this chart this way, so say pick utilities, a cut of 10,000, or actually, sorry, let's cut paper costs, 10,000, 10,000. That means you're not reducing by 10,000 every year.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
so just to clarify in my mind what's being cut, then the cuts for 2017, 2018 would actually be the difference between these two numbers?
Yes.
So that means that you've cut $363,000 for this year, and that goes down to then 95,000, and then no cuts for the following years. Is that correct?
As far as what's been implemented,
Right.
yes.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure that got that set. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anything else? We can move on to the discussion about the Budget Committee in that case.
I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Guard, who is in charge of our Budget Committee. Agenda item.
Thank you, Superintendent Williams. So on October 10th, 2017, I brought forward an item to recommend a ad hoc budget committee. The budget committee was essentially going to look at the survey responses that we received over the fall, look at items, come up with recommendations for the following year. We met twice. However, on December 5th, kind of with the meeting from the budget, as well as kind of some of the news that we were hearing about potential good news from the state, I brought forward a revision to this committee's work, where instead of this short-term time frame, it would be more expanded, and we would be able to work through, we would be able to dig into a lot of financial data. We would be able to develop recommendations, develop strategies on engagement, and then come forward a year from now with recommendations to the superintendent and the school board. And so because it was a revision to the intent of the original committee, I felt the need to allow members who did not originally sign up for this time frame to essentially bow out if the time frame didn't meet their work life or other other commitments. And so we do have about 7 seats that are currently vacant. And what I wanted to do was bring to the board, because there were several comments at the December 5th board meeting about making this a board-appointed committee versus a non-board appointed committee. And so this item is for the board to discuss whether they would want a board-appointed committee or not.
Okay, I have 2 things real quick. First, I'm sorry, this email came in too late for me to pass it on to you and forewarn you, so you may not have an answer. But one of the things that I saw in background on this was that it would take quite a long time to get a board-appointed committee up and going. And I'm just going to read this. It says, upon reviewing the accompanying staff report, I'm puzzled it would take 3 months to enact these principles if the Matty Act provides 15 days posting. The Brown Act requires 3 days posting. Why would it take 72 additional days to implement?
Yes. I'm glad I looked at my email for the board meeting. Today is today, and if the board gives direction that this committee should be a board-appointed committee, then I would want to clarify what the composition of that committee is, and so that could be brought forward at the next board meeting on February 13th. And after that is when we would post the advertisements for roles under the Matty Act. And I would want time after the publication in order to accept applications. And so that would be in mid-March. So it would be in March 27th when the board could actually approve the people to be on the committee. And then because of spring break occurring, the first meeting wouldn't begin until mid to late April. However, even if the board decides to move forward with a board-appointed committee, we still have members on the current group who would want to meet throughout this time to ensure that we maximize this time frame.
Great, thanks. Jacob.
Yeah, earlier I requested that I could read the email, and it's part of what you just referenced.
Sure.
So yeah, this email was sent to the board just around 5 o'clock this afternoon, so I'm not sure if everybody got a chance to read it, but it's from a parent named Ben Wallace, and he says, Dear Albany, or Dear AUSD board members, thank you for considering the Budget Committee on tonight's agenda. I am out of town, therefore cannot attend. However, I urge you to take steps to ensure transparency and inclusiveness in the operation and composition of the committee. Specifically, I respectfully request the following. 1, that the meetings be held in public. 2, an invitation to all community members so anyone can put their name forward for consideration. 3, contact information for committee members posted on the website with appropriate consideration for privacy. 4, the meeting schedule posted on the website and changes or cancellations announced. 5, a concerted effort to appoint participants, parents, students, teachers, etc., of diverse races, ethnicities, economic levels, and ability levels. And then the part that you referenced about it taking, because your board thing says 3 months, which is 90 days. And even with this, I'm not, I'll finish his email, but I didn't want to repeat the part that Paul had already read. And then in his wrapping up last paragraph, it says, I believe these changes, combined with laudable efforts that the district is already making to provide more clear and concise budget data, will provide the opportunity for all stakeholders to make constructive input on the difficult decisions ahead, and will maximize the community's trust and confidence in the process. I appreciate your consideration of my request. Many thanks. Best regards, Ben. And that's Ben Wallace. So he was the one who spoke at December 5th, and you could tell he put a lot of time and thought into it, and obviously he's out of town, so he didn't really ask me to read it, but I wanted to read it.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm very interested to hear our board members who are on the ad hoc committee how you feel about making or creating an ongoing permanent board-appointed committee for the budget. Care to comment?
That's you and me, yeah. Do you want to go
first
for
if you like?
Yeah. You know, I've seen the district do it both ways with board-appointed committees and committees that aren't board-appointed committees. Both types of committees can provide good input. I do think that this has advantages. It is a little harder to observe the Brown Act, but the fact that the meetings are open public meetings, I think, has a lot going for it. Personally, I'd like to see the existing committee continue its work until the new one can get going. I don't think that there's any need to lay down the existing committee.
Correct.
My only question on this really has to do with the composition of the committee. And we might need to talk about that in a couple minutes. The question, I guess, is that when we have school site councils, there's an attempt to have a pretty balanced number of employees and non-employees on those committees. In fact, I think that's required by law.
Right.
Here, there is no balance. So that's my question. I think it's worth talking about a little.
Okay, what kind of balance are you looking for?
Well, when I look at the composition of the committee, we have, in the first paragraph, we have 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 employees and 5 parents. And then we add to that 2 board members, a student board member, a superintendent, and chief business official. So, you know, I'm not sure that, I guess that's a total of 16 employees and 8 who are not, if you count the board members.
And what would you propose?
Well, I think I'd just like to hear other people's reactions to that. That's an observation. I'm just puzzled by that, and maybe there's an explanation.
Okay, well, my reaction really is that it's a rather large committee. Already, you could add a lot more people and attempt to achieve balance. But as an ongoing committee, I don't know what the chances are that you'd get good attendance. I don't really know. It's a great principle. I mean, it's a great idea. And certainly if it's, you know, as the email that Jacob just read said, you know, be looking for a balance. And really, the entire community pays for the schools, so it shouldn't even be restricted to parents and members of the school community. It should be open to the general community. On the other hand, as an open Brown Act committee, all the meetings are posted, and anybody from the public who wants to can come and talk. And that is supposed to provide that balance. I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion on it. It's an interesting question. Jacob, what were your thoughts?
A lot of the people who are on the committee, I think when we talked about it before, some of them had showed interest in possibly applying to be on this one if we didn't go ahead and take that route. Just me personally, I would like to go with it. I've only been on the board for a year, but what he said in his email and when he spoke, and I've heard it from other people, it really disturbs me that there's people in the community who don't trust us. And I'm hoping that we can build that trust. So it might be more work, or it might be a little wieldy to try to get everything together. It might take some time. But when I'm hearing people in the community say they have a lack of trust, and I'm one of those people, not that it's necessarily directed towards me, it's a little disturbing to me. So I would advocate for having it be a board-appointed committee to try to build trust with the community. So that's just my opinion.
I have an observation. and maybe my math is wrong, but I'm counting, it says committee total 24, and I count 23. But that being said, we have, of all the people that are on this committee, we have one student
There's
board
24.
member. There's 24?
Yeah, there's 24.
10, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20. Okay, I'm sorry, maybe
There's
just,
the 2 school and the 2 school board, so maybe.
17.
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't, you're right, you're 2 school board, I
I
counted
did the
once.
same thing the first time.
Thank you.
I read it.
Sorry, that probably just really detracted from really the point I wanted to make. We have one student board member. And when we think about equal representation, I'm wondering, would it be possible to add one more student, not a board member, but maybe adding a student? And I'm asking that for a reason. Our Albany High School students are very interested, and some may be interested in budget. And would it be possible to have 25 and add one more student to the mix?
Jacob?
I think that's great. I don't know if, I don't want to make it even larger, but I spoke with some of the high school students and the middle school students, so they're kind of just restricted to it. I don't know if you said a high school student, but at the meeting I was at, there was a lot of really interested middle school students, and these cuts are going to be coming later on, so they're going to be impacted more than somebody who might be a senior or a junior who might not see them, so take that into consideration.
Okay, so we should probably try to wrap this up. We have a lot of people here waiting for another discussion. Did you want to comment on this, Adam?
I just wanted to reiterate the ATA's position on this, that we really do want to see something of more formal committee with more transparency. The process so far with meetings being scheduled, meetings being canceled, schedules being changed, I think we really need to see a more formal process with this committee. Thank you.
So tell me if I'm wrong, if anybody doesn't agree. I feel like we have a consensus on the board that we should direct staff to agendize a formal creation of the committee so we can get this going, but that the ad hoc committee will continue to meet in the meanwhile. Jacob?
Just one last thing. I don't want to slow us down either. I know there's a lot of people here who want to speak. The Maddie Act or whatever, you had that kind of farther down your list. I don't understand why we can't just go ahead and post a position right now while we're still composing who's going to be on it, because it can just be open. Who's interested, and then if they fit into the categories or they don't, we'll have to limit from which category. But to move the process, it seemed like that 15-day thing was like halfway down your thing. To me, that seemed like we could just do that tomorrow if we're in consensus that we want to move along with this.
I think there would have to be the committee for which the recruitment, I mean, it's
So
kind
you
of
wouldn't have
like-
to say a parent or a student or a board member. You can just say we're looking for up to 30 members, and then later on we can discuss.
We could start soliciting interest and not, say we're anticipating.
But wouldn't that fulfill the requirement with the 15 days in that act? We don't have to get all specific and
But if
say.
the committee doesn't exist, I mean, it's kind of like putting out a bid for wireless access points without a resolution to authorize you to do it. You have to have
We've
a
just said that
committee.
we have come to consensus, so eventually we can vote on it.
Not tonight. This is not
Right.
an action item tonight.
Right, but we can still post and say that we're. Alan, please.
The only thing is if the composition of the committee, so if the board agrees to the current composition, then I would be able to post advertisements tomorrow. But if the board decides to revise the composition, the MADI Act is essentially there so that people who can fulfill certain roles are able to be aware and then submit an application for it. And so if we say this current composition and then in February we advertise for a different composition, then that could impact the applications received. And so I guess we would just need to know what the composition of what the board would want the composition to be so that I could properly advertise.
Charlie?
I don't know that we can decide that tonight. I presume you're looking at that first block. If it came down to decisions the committee had to make, the first block of people would be voting members, and the second block in attendance would be observers. And so I'm looking at a committee that I still have some concerns about how that's constituted. With 14 of 19 people as voting members being school employees, there's something I think maybe needs a little rethinking there.
Okay, so,
Sounds fine.
okay,
Yeah.
good. So I guess we have direction to staff to move forward with the process and to bring it back on the agenda for formal action. Which brings us to what most of you are here for tonight. Before we start on this, we agreed at the beginning of the meeting, it says 30 minutes on the agenda. We agreed to increase it to 40 minutes, which would bring us to 9:25. So before we start this, can we get an agreement from the board to extend the meeting until 9:30? All right.
Yes.
So we're going to start our discussion of special education, and we're going to start it with some words from staff on what has been done so far.
Thank you, President Black and trustees and members of the community. And I promise we will keep this brief because I know there's a lot of folks that want to make some comments. So I did want to give the board an update from the last board meeting that we had, and I'll let Marie start, and then I'll talk a little about what I've been doing in reaching out to staff. And of the 40 minutes, I think we can do this in 5 minutes or less.
Okay, since the
About
last
2.5 minutes.
Guess you have to turn it on. Since we last met, our special education roundtable met, and our agenda items for that meeting was to review surveys and meeting notes from meetings that the program specialists and I had from meetings with paras at each site. We talked about increasing para-educator involvement at the sites, providing training for paras, including a new para training that paras would receive before they actually started their job, updating the para handbook. There's a request for PD for our teachers surrounding working with para-educators in the classroom because some of them manage 6 to 8 para-educators, and they said those aren't skills that they're taught in college. There's no course, and that training has been provided. It was provided at our January staff meeting, and we talked about the paraeducator salary being a CSEA negotiated item. In addition to our roundtable meeting, as I've mentioned, the program specialists and I met with paras at each of the sites to collect their input and to ask them to fill out a survey. Program specialists, I also met with teacher reps from each of our sites to discuss the idea that was presented, a need for a clerk or somebody to schedule IEP meetings. We talked about case managers, and each site is given an allocation of special education teachers, and our current ATA contract has a maximum for resource teachers of 28. So my office looks at the number of students who are going to be at each site and provides an allocation. Then the sites decide how exactly that they will use that allocation. I know that at least one site is talking about using, well, for example, this year, both our middle and our high school sites took 0.2 of a resource position, and that individual teaches one less class and, excuse me, and is doing all of the initial assessments for that site. We have another site that is talking about using some of the allocations to create a case manager who would hold all of the IEPs, who would do all the IEP writing, et cetera, and then the other teachers would teach the same number of classes as a general ed teacher because they wouldn't be doing the case management duties. And this would not be an option, I need to mention, for our elementaries because we only have one resource specialist, so they do it all. We have continued to interview paraeducators as we receive applications since since I was last at the board meeting for the staff report. We have scheduled 11 interviews. Of those, 7 people have actually shown up to interview. We've moved forward 6 paraeducators and 1 sub. Thus far, 3 of them have made it through the HR process, and going through the process are 1 para and 1 para sub, and we have 6 interviews scheduled for Friday.
Thank you. I think it gives me about maybe 2 minutes quickly. So I had an opportunity to meet with Rich Ritchie, Carla, and a couple of other folks, as well as our ATA co-president. I had some clarifying questions on the document that was provided to the board, because I wanted to make sure about what was either going to be an additional position or what would be dissemination of duties. I did also have an opportunity to visit Janet Teal's class last Friday and filled in for that period. The para had not shown up, so I got to work with the students. I have scheduled several meetings over the next 2 weeks. I've had one meeting with some paras, and I already have scheduled meetings with special ed teachers and paras at all of our sites over the next 2 weeks. I think I've got 5 meetings scheduled this week. I just had an opportunity to speak with Carla Jordan-Swan this evening, and at least at the high school, an agreement has been reached to pilot the idea of having a case manager take on the IEPs and having the other teachers take on additional classes. And one of my questions was, is this something that the ATA would agree to? And my understanding from Carla is that this isn't agreed upon. We might need to work with ATA on an MOU or memorandum of understanding or side letter. And one of and I did ask her permission to share this information. She did give me that permission, and so she said that at least at the high school with this new pilot process, that there would not need to be a clerk to schedule the meetings because the case manager would do that. So I think we're moving a bit in the right direction. I think we still have an issue with are having enough paraprofessionals who are coming daily to be in classrooms and finding the subs who will actually fill those positions. And I do not have an answer for the board tonight on that, but I do know that anything that involves conversations with CSE, I think we would need to sit down with them to see what is bargainable, what is not, especially when we talk about issues of increasing pay in that area. But it is something that we're going to need to continue to look at because there is an issue with having our para coverage. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I think it's unlikely that CSEA would have strong objections to raising salaries, but there are obviously budget considerations also in that case. But certainly we have a problem not necessarily with finding paras as much as getting them to come to work. So anything that improves their working conditions would probably be beneficial in that.
And I have reached out to our CSEA president to see if we can schedule a meeting to talk about some of the issues. I'm very interested to hear what some of the paras have said. I've only had a chance to meet with the paraprofessionals at one school site, so I really don't want to share those ideas yet because I really want to get a kind of a cross-site feedback from them as well as from our special ed teachers.
Thanks. Questions from the board? Navin?
I'd actually just like to, excuse me. I just actually quickly like to make a comment. So today I got an email, and so did the other student board member, and it was regarding the paras and how their scheduling worked out. And in this email noted from Albany Middle School, it noted that they were either missing the first half an hour or the last half an hour of a day. And something that was brought up to me in this email was the fact that these small gaps make big differences. And I think that while I don't have a solution, I think that this is a very important issue, and I think that this is something that the board and the public should work together on to fight, because as a district, our responsibility is to all students, and I think that this is an issue that needs to be resolved as soon as possible.
Thanks. Charlie?
So I've been thinking about what I'd like to hear from people. So I thought I should kind of reveal what I think would be helpful for me. And that is, I've been thinking that the board has never voted on a budget for special education. We don't set a special education budget. So we can't really change what we don't set. So we're aware that there are budget implications.
Do you want to expand on that a little bit, why the board doesn't vote on a special education budget?
Well, I can try. Special education is a service that we provide. Special needs students have needs, and those needs should be met. Not only is it legally required, but we want to meet their needs. So the funding we get to provide for special needs students is a fraction of what the education actually costs, and we provide that education. So it's unlike other programs where we have a certain amount of money and we have to live within that budget. We don't do that with special needs students. So we're not really needing to hear so much about budget, but I do want to hear about what works, maybe what doesn't work as much, and then I'm interested in hearing about process. I don't think any of us here has the expertise or the inclination to micromanage any department. That's not what we do. But what we want to do is make sure that the process is in place so that all the departments run well. So I think that's what I'm interested in hearing about.
Great. Jacob?
Yeah, just briefly, too, as far as the speakers who were coming up, I appreciate everybody showing up tonight. We've kind of gone back and forth on this a couple of times, and I'm glad that we're here again. I would like to get a little more clarification on if people are asking the staff to add positions or if you guys are asking for district office staff who's already there to pick up some of these responsibilities, because that's a big difference. I got an email from Val about some board questions that the board asked, and it looks to me like the solution is just to start hiring, opposed to looking at finding ways to have other people pick up more of the work. So I wanted to make sure that when people come up and speak, if you can give us a little input on if you think there's ways that we can have current staff pick up more of the work without adding FTEs or that's full-time employments or positions.
So actually, I think I can answer part of that because since that time, I've actually had a chance to sit down with the group of there are like four or five people to actually clarify these. And so I don't know if Richie's in the group, but we actually talked, and so you can kind of be my checks and balances. I can go down some of these. And the issue with the case manager is, while it says a separate person to draft and complete IEP documents, that was not an addition. The idea, after speaking with this group, was to have one person be the case manager, and then the other teachers would pick up an extra section. So, for example, if at the middle school, if Richie is the case manager, his classes would be picked up by the other teachers, which would allow him the year, I'm going to say the year, just for explanation purposes, Rich, to cover that, and then they would potentially rotate it every year to somebody else. So that first case manager position is not an additional position, and in fact, if it works, could potentially be revenue neutral. The independent position to complete all initial assessments does indicate that it is an additional position that is being asked for. Am I correct, Rich?
That's correct.
Okay. The providing the paraprofessionals with a full day shift, it's not adding necessarily positions, it is increasing the day that the paraprofessionals would work, which would be an increase in cost, but not necessarily an increase in people. So like an FTE, because with paras it's different, it's done by hourly, it's hard to calculate into sort of a straight FTE like it would with a teacher. Correct?
There is a version similar to that, but given the fact that we have a lot of needs, and as you experienced being there on Friday, and thank you for being there. I saw you rolling up your sleeves and being a para, which was awesome. You helped 3 students. 2 of them were mine. One was a 504. Mr. Black was there. Thank you. Mr. Gray was there. So it could involve adding more paras, depending on how the scheduling happens. We had an email from the Department of Special Ed at the DO level saying that we don't have a para shortage. It's about scheduling. And then the recommendation was that all we needed to do was cluster more special ed kids into other classes, which means now you're loading up these general ed classes with even more resource or special day class teachers or students, and that's not the solution, okay? And for somebody to even, recommend that, I feel like, you're out of touch. I would ask, have you ever been a teacher in a classroom before? Because it's challenging. The solution is not cluster more resource students to make it fit the number of employees we have. The solution is allow the principal of the site to balance the classes out equitably among the staff, and then fill those classes with the necessary resource paras or special day class paras. That's how we should be looking at it. So there could be an increase.
So this one could be an increase. Thank you for the clarification. The next section was building a paraprofessional training program upon hire. That is not an increase in positions, but it would potentially be a cost. I'm going to say maybe not, because there are some things that the SELPA does provide. What would be a cost is for, and this is something that I think is just an ongoing challenge, is that any type of ongoing professional development, if it occurs outside the work hours of the employee, has a cost of paying them additional time. The next section was provide a 2-level paraprofessional job classification, and they talked about having an academic para, and so that could potentially be an increase in staffing. The other was to have a substitute floater paraprofessional pool, and even though that we currently have 2 floating two floating sub paras, one of those paras was actually pulled in to backfill a position, and so there is a daily need for substitutes, which is why I think we originally said let's try this with 2 floating paras. If that pool were to increase from 2 to any other number, that would be additional employees. The last one we discussed, which is assigning a substitute paraprofessional, is an administrative duty, not a teacher duty. This doesn't necessarily have to be an increase in staff, and we would need to look at, is this something that can be shifted to existing staff? And some of the concerns that I think we discussed in the meeting was who knows the kids best and who knows when something can happen. I think one of the recommendations that was made was that if we had a paraprofessional at each site, correct me if I didn't get this right, a paraprofessional at each site that had longer hours, that the first period of that day, that para could really work on putting the substitute paras because they would know basically the kids. Did I get that right?
That was one of the suggestions, yes, because at the site, we do know our children, and each site knows their children best. What we're running into is if I'm teaching a first period class, as it happened this week, and we had a lot of absenteeisms with the flu, I have to stop my class, which is instructional minutes for a group of students, so that I can play the jigsaw game with our para schedule and run all over the place. And that's taking minutes away from students that I should be teaching, direct teaching. In the bigger picture, is it servicing students in the entire site? Absolutely, but we're still running short. So one of the recommendations at our meeting was, well, maybe we could have a para who knows our students, a veteran para, who could then do that administrative duty during first period. We still need to look at having full shifts for these paras. There's just no way, as I guess someone emailed the board about the shifts being 8 to 2:30 or 8:30 to 3, we're playing this game where we're ending up short, whether it's on the morning side or on the back side, okay? We're out of compliance, okay? And we've been out of compliance for a while.
I think one of the other, if I got one more piece, because I do want to share this, and again, I have not had a chance to sit down and meet with all the paras, because I really want to ask several questions, especially one, what are some of the issues that paras feel that may be contributing to an attendance issue. But one of the things I do want to share is that one group of paras that I met with did say that that one of the issues they have is if a para comes to work and they want to expect a certain schedule, and then to move at the middle and the high school, and this, at least right now, from the limited information I have, is that the issue at the secondary level is if a para comes to work and is assigned, and then we don't have a para coverage because the para is out, paras have to shift around and go to cover another classroom for maybe, I'll say, a student that had more needs, okay? For that para, they never know where they're going to potentially be on any given day. And so what I'm hearing is that this is a morale issue, which potentially could be enhancing or exacerbating an attendance issue. I don't know if that is true. I have not yet had a chance to meet with the middle and high school paras, but that is something that I have been hearing as a potential issue. So I think it's a myriad of things that are contributing to the issue. I think the other piece too is we really need to look at, we advertise in several different areas, and maybe we need to look at other ways of advertising for our paras. I don't know if we need to have a recruitment fair. I'm not sure. I'm just not 100% sure yet.
Tim?
So I wanted to clarify, I think Mr. Clark had said he wanted some clarification about some other ideas. And Ms. Williams, when we met, I appreciate you reaching out and meeting with myself and several other teachers and the co-union president. And we had a limited amount of time. We went over a few minutes. I appreciate that. But we really didn't get to talk about many other options or ideas. And I'd like to say that, I, as a teacher, I don't speak for everybody here. I have ideas, and they're welcome to come forward and share their ideas, okay? But I've been here just about every board meeting, and I'm hearing from a lot of these folks here, not everybody, but a lot, and I'm up here trying to basically get it out and advocate for our families, our students, and our colleagues. And I have to say, before I go into your question, in June, I came to the board, it was after about a 2-year run, 2 years of following the process, of going through the proper chain of command, 2 years of being ignored, not by my site, but by the district office, 2 years of getting the party line. No matter what these professionals out here said, the teachers, the paraprofessionals, they work with these students day in and day out. Ms. Williams, you got a taste of that on Friday. Just a taste. Okay? I met with the program specialist, through the director of special ed. I met with my site principal, with the program specialist in the office. I met with the co-union president at the time, was Ms. Gray. I worked the system. There's a reason I came here in June. The system's broken. It shouldn't be that way. We as professionals should not be ignored. We had a forced reassignment last year of a teacher against her will from the high school to the middle school in the month of November. It disrupted students' lives. sixth graders' lives. They lost their teacher. That teacher went to the high school. The high school teacher came down. What a mess. I can't believe that that came across your desk, Ms. Williams. Decision-making from your staff cannot be in a vacuum. I'd like to finish addressing what Mr. Clark was talking about here. Some of these things, like taking on the initial assessments, which were over 110 last year, that's a lot of work, okay? These 504 assessments, these private school assessments, those things could, in theory, be pushed back up to the district office, okay? The two program specialists, the director, they're making a bank of money. And I don't say, you know, they could take on more. We're talking, according to this website, with package, $436,753. Okay? They can absorb some of those duties and allow us, case managers, or, well, we're called case managers, teachers, to get back into those classrooms and teach with our students. They're making big money, 6 figures. Okay? That's one idea that we didn't get to discuss. Okay? Another idea I was thinking about, and again, this is my idea. I'm welcome to anybody to come up here and provide their ideas, whoever they are. Come on up. Okay? When I started in this district, I said we didn't have a director of special education. We didn't have program specialists. And I seem to remember spending more time with my students and doing less paperwork. Now, what happened is the assistant superintendent had that responsibility. And then it was the site principal, and it was the teacher or special ed teacher. And decisions that got stuck or families weren't happy with that decision, it went to the assistant superintendent. And then they got a decision, probably a lot quicker than what's going on now. There's no middle ground, no middle people in the way. So here's a thought. Cost-saving measure. If you remove those 3 positions and reallocate them to 3 special ed teachers, okay, and I just pulled up, say, a 3-year teacher salary with benefits, that would cost the district $254,766 with benefits package. And that's a savings of almost $200,000 a year. So if you're looking to cut our budgets, okay, and we've heard it from many people out here, let's look at the district office. If you started with, I'm just going to pick a number, 12 district office people, staffers, in 2010, and we're now 2018, and we now have, I don't know, 20, let's say, at the district office, yet our population hasn't really grown, right? We don't have thousands of students joining us, according to Mr. Garb here. We're on a downhill slide. Then why do we need those 8 extra people up there? What are they doing? We functioned just fine 12 years ago when I started. We need to get back to basics. Students first. Students first.
Can we move on and hear Kim's question?
I just wanted to ask about the shifts, the 8 to 2:30 and the 8:30 to 3. Can you give me some history on that? Why is it set up that way that it doesn't match the school day?
Typically, our paras are 5 or 6 hours. At the elementary sites with the different school hours, that's basically the pairs used to be 1 6-hour and 1 5-hour. And at the high school level and the middle school level, it's been a 6. We have a couple 6.5-hour positions, one a 6 3/4, and it gives, in the past, the need has been during the lunch period in the middles of the day, and there hasn't been a need for paras. Some of them work 8 to 2:30, some work 8:30 to 3, some work 9, I don't know, whatever the half hours are. And so there's usually a half hour on either end. We do have 2 paras at the middle school that span the entire day.
It's
Based on student needs.
Well, but isn't the para assigned to the student for the day?
Not necessarily. For example, if a resource room class is not meeting, you might not need as many paras in each period. Usually we put a resource or a para in each of our resource labs. So for example, if there's not a lab first period, you might not need the para during that period. And they kind of fluctuate them back and forth to meet kids' needs.
It sounds like at the secondary level that there's not a good matchup between the schedule and the school schedule and the para schedule.
When you look at the high school, it gets a little bit tricky. If we had a para in place for each period, I don't remember, I counted the minutes, and it's somewhere at 6 hours and 20 minutes average of a day. It's like maybe a 0.87 something. And that would be for paras to start at 8:10 and then end whatever day the school day ended each day, because with the block schedules, it varies. And for example, we have one para who works just 5 hours, but she works from 8 until 1, I think. And some of them work different hours each day because if they don't need a person during a certain period, because of the schedule. A student, it's not as prevalent at the high school for paraeducators to support kids in the general ed, because we work on fostering independence, and I'm talking about the resource level. So each period, a para may be needed in general education to support a student in English or in math. So it depends on when those classes are scheduled.
Thank you.
Before we go any farther, how many of you actually want to come up and speak? Okay, so Rich, if you can make time for other people, I'm going to ask a couple of things. We're going to try to keep comments to 3 minutes. If somebody else has already said what you want to say, please just say, I agree.
I'm happy to step down with hopefully not the final comment, because I'll come back through, but what I just heard from the director, that's the biggest problem we have. We got bean counting over here. Okay? The director needs to listen to the teachers in the classes that are supporting these students. And when they say they need somebody from 2:30 to 3, we should have somebody. Or 8 to 8:30. The bean counting and the 1-to-4 ratio that you whipped up here doesn't work in the classroom. That's boardroom statistics. We're living it every day. Your thinking model needs to change. You work for us. We don't work for you. We work for these students, and we work for each other.
Hey, Jackie, if you could get the timer ready. Sorry?
Yeah, I'm just observing the time, and maybe I really do want to hear what people have to say, but I think just where this is going to go is we as a board have only one employee, and that's the superintendent. And I think where this is going to go is that we are probably going to ask the superintendent to work with staff to tell us what is an appropriate and best and feasible and desirable approach moving forward. I can't imagine this board will choose to try to make specific decisions. We don't have that expertise. We need to have people talk it through offline. It's going to take a lot more time than the time that we have at this board meeting. That's my thinking as to where this is going to go.
I really do want to hear the comments, but also will continue to meet with each of the teams. I want to hear from the special ed teachers and the paras in order for me to figure out what our next steps are going to be. I can definitely come back to the board and address some of the issues that Mr. Ritchie brought up about making sure that there is input into the process, and just start looking at what some of the issues are. Excuse me, I lose my voice here. But I really did want to hear what folks wanted to share, because I can add it to my notes as well.
Jacob, did you have a last?
I'll save my comments for the end.
Okay, thanks. Please.
Well, hello there. My name's Karen Bonini. I'm a teacher at Cornell, special ed teacher, Cornell and the middle school. I'm here tonight to address para pay, which I've heard some things about, but I'm reading a letter on behalf of one of my paras who could not come. But I also wanted to make a statement about person-first language. I don't prefer the term special needs students. It really should be students with special needs, so just for the board for future reference. To whom it may concern, my name is Olinda Scher. I began working as a paraeducator on March 14, 2000. Today, 18 years later and 16 professional growth units later, my salary is that of $21,609, a salary considered by the U.S. Census to be poverty wage. Over the course of 18 years, I've worked with an array of students whose ages range from preschool to high school transition program and disabilities from moderately to severely disabled. I accepted this position graciously because I knew that my assistance would greatly impact the lives of my students, many of whom are often segregated from other students and whom feel awkward and uncomfortable in school settings. My work to uplift students and assist them to reach their greatest potential academically and socially has not been easy. Throughout my time with Albany Unified School District, I have experienced abuse by students with disabilities. I have been spat on, kicked, pinched, hit, and verbally abused by my students. Granted, my students do have disabilities. However, it takes a strong-willed person who is dedicated and committed to changing their life to tolerate this abuse and continue to work hard towards improving my students' lives. And that is what I do when I wake up every morning to help my students. While my job is gratifying to know that I'm helping the disabled community overcome obstacles and integrate into mainstream society, I feel as though I myself and other aides are being put aside and neglected because of our low wages. In addition to this job that is physically and mentally exhausting myself and other aides, myself and other aides have had to take on second and third jobs at times simply to make ends meet. Being the base of the AUSD special education program, we deserve to be compensated with wages that reflect our hard work and dedication towards education and improving the lives of our students with special needs.
Good evening. Hi. My name is Janet Teal. I am currently in my 34th year of teaching at Albany Middle School, which may be why I look a little tired tonight. Although I've been a general education teacher for many years, I have my master's degree in special education and have worked as both a resource specialist and a special day class teacher. And I want to say I've written out comments I'm going to try to skip through based on what others have said. If I go over 3 minutes, please bear with me. This is only the second time I've spoken before the board in 35 years, so I'm hoping you'll allow me a little bit of time here. The number one problem that I've experienced over the past few years is that many of our resource students are not getting the services that are legally mandated in their IEPs. More specifically, more often than not, there is no one coming to support them in their general education classes. And for many of our RSP students, these are the only special ed services that they are supposed to receive, as many are not enrolled in a lab. And when I say not getting services, I'm not talking about occasional absences of paras, but not receiving services 80 to 90% of the year. So I'll speak briefly about the past couple of years where I've had resource students, and I have them now, whose IEPs mandate daily push and support from paras. Basically, for the most part, no one is showing up. Thank you, Val, for showing up on Friday. You were the first person who came to assist this student in several days. The students I have now whose IEPs say they'll get daily support, sometimes it's weeks. Last year, it was literally months before somebody came. And I have to ask myself, why am I here at a board meeting? Appearing here should be, and is in fact, my last resort and the culmination of a series of written appeals over at least the past couple of years. So, don't faint, I'm not going to read these, but I just wanted to show sort of as Exhibit A, this is my emails that I've sent to the district office just last year alone. This is back to back, okay? About, it's been 3 weeks since my students have had no support. It's been 4 weeks, it's been 2 months. This is this year, much the same, okay? Occasionally, substitute pairs do show up. When they do, it's usually never the same person. We never know if they're coming or not coming. They might show up 5 minutes into the period, and I have 31 students in front of me, and some very nice person will come up and say, "Hi, I'm here to help." And I cannot stop and point out, oh, you're supposed to work with this person, and this person, and try to teach them my curriculum in 5 minutes so that they can help the students. Val, you were a quick study. You were an English teacher. You were able to do it, but most people cannot. So why have there been so many emails? And I'm going to be really frank here. The email responses, can I turn this off?
I'm sorry, because this is going to continue to be, can we extend her?
Can I extend my time? Thank you. I probably will not be back again, so I'm going to make the most of this. The responses I got in this pile, the most frustrating has been telling me there's no para shortage. And I don't want to play word games. I don't want to play semantics. On paper, it looks like everybody should be covered. In the PowerPoint that we saw last December, we have a 1-to-4 ratio, which is wonderful on paper. The reality is a number of our students need 1-to-1 paras. Well, you do the math. If you're including those 1-to-1 paras in the 1-to-4 ratio, all of a sudden you're talking about 1-to-8, 1-to-12, 1-to-16, okay? It also completely ignores the fact that we have extremely high absentee rate among paras, and there aren't enough substitutes to begin to fill the needs. Furthermore, we have a triage system. So if a 1-to-1 para is absent, resource paras are pulled from the regular classrooms, and any substitute paras are also sent to work with the students with the greatest needs, as it should be. However, the students in the regular classrooms get no one. So again, briefly touching on what Mr. Ritchie said, another email told me the problem is not numbers, it's scheduling, and that we need to cluster these students. And if we can put enough bodies in with one para, we're covered. And that's not good educational sense. Okay, so what are some possible solutions? These are actually things that I've sent to the district office and until last week been ignored. Start with a needs assessment. Everybody's been talking about paras and resource teachers and the district office. That's important. What about the general education teachers who are supporting these students plus the 27 others in every class? Ask us what's going on. Okay? So talk to us. What is going on? What is the reality of resource support or lack of support in our classrooms? This could be accomplished in 2 ways. One, sit down and meet with us. Okay? Talk to us about what's going on, what the difficulties are, what the concerns are, what we could possibly do. Secondly, do a systematic gathering of data over time as to how many periods per week resource students are not receiving the services. Data, the district is big on it. Why doesn't it not apply here? Most important, follow up with action. Once the district acknowledges the magnitude of the problem, what are we going to do about it? What are the solutions? What are the timelines? And where is our accountability? Another difficulty, I think, is we need to strengthen the communication between district office and teachers. So instead of just sending out another email, which general education teachers never see, saying there are 12 paras out district-wide with no substitutes, please become a part of the solution, as Val demonstrated last week. We realize there are hiring difficulties, but this situation has been going on for years. What are we supposed to do, and what do our students do in the meantime? So I have one scenario. An open invitation to district office staff not to visit and observe, but to pitch in. Roll up your sleeves. My analogy is this. I worked my way through college as a waitress and a cocktail waitress. So whenever I go out to eat, I'm always watching to see what's going on. If things start going south, I don't judge the waitress. I look to see what the manager is doing. Do I see the manager? If that manager rolls up their sleeves and is bussing tables and taking orders and talking to customers, it makes me feel much better about my experience. Okay? So the metaphor is this. Please roll up your sleeves, come to the middle school, and fill in for a para for a day. A one-to-one is absent. You be the one-to-one. Don't pull the resource paras from their classes. Experience what our paras experience on a daily basis. In that situation, resource paras won't have to be pulled from GE classrooms. You'll actually be on site talking to us and talking to students and talking to resource teachers and GE teachers and hearing from us firsthand what's going on. It will improve collegiality where teachers feel like you're willing to be a part of the solution. So this scenario is not without precedent. Last year, or maybe the year before, during our power outage, the entire directorial staff came in the district office to help manage the turmoil with not having a school full of students and no computers. I want to say it was actually a morale booster to see you guys work side by side with our office staff. I would also venture to say that just because the lights are on now does not mean that we are not in a crisis. Okay? So the bottom line is that the fact that so many of our students are not getting the resource services to which they are legally entitled is a problem that should not be ignored. As a teacher and as a parent, I often ask myself what steps I would take if this were my own child who were not receiving the services essential for his or her learning. And this is why I am fighting so hard to get this resolved. I ask each of you to do the same.
Thank you. Now, we've already used the 40 minutes. I think the board will probably want to extend the meeting to hear some more comments. How long just counting the number of people standing up here, we should probably extend it at least to 9:50, if not 10 o'clock. What do you think?
Let's just say 10 o'clock now, and so we don't have to do this again if we need it. If we end at 9:50, that's fine.
Okay, thanks. And again, I'm going to say, if somebody's already said what you want to say, just say you agree, and if you can, try to keep your comments to 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jenny Anderson. Olga has graciously let me go in front of her just to say, basically, I agree, but I want to emphasize that I've been teaching at Albany Middle School for 25 years. I had Charlie's daughter, I don't know, about 25 years ago. And
Not quite that long ago.
Yeah, okay, all right. I had a whole speech prepared, but I'm basically saying I'm in total agreement with Rich Ritchie and Janet Teal, and I respect them. And the chronic shortage of paras at our school has been a crisis for a long time. And I wanted to just add one comment, and that is when a para keeps jumping from different student to student, the para doesn't know those students, and they don't have a connection with those students. They don't know that student's particular needs as well as someone who's consistently with that student. Also, the para won't be familiar with the curriculum either. So she'll be coming into ancient India studies in my class and then jumping to, pre-calculus in another class. That para has to deal with that curriculum change along with adjusting and trying to connect to a student he or she doesn't know. It's just not good for the kids at all. So I just want to say thank you to Rich and Janet, and thank you for this time.
Thanks. Kim?
But Ms. Anderson, I have a question for you. Because of your lengthy experience, I just wanted to ask you, do you recall a time when the situation was different and when there was more regular attendance by the paras?
Yes. A long time ago.
A long time ago.
It's been a decade, I'd say, at least.
Huh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it just seems to be particularly bad the last few years, but I don't know. I'm over 50. I don't have much of a memory. But it was better at one time, yes. So.
What is your feeling about the cause of the chronic absenteeism?
I think if I had to earn $15 an hour for a part-time job and part-time benefits, I wouldn't feel the need to show up either. I wouldn't take the job in the first place, so we don't attract qualified people. But then what's the motivation for staying? So you were saying you don't control that budget, but whoever does, we need to do something about it. That, Olinda Scher earning $21,000 after 18 years is criminal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to be able to point out that there was a lot of families that had to leave. They brought their children, and I also want to make sure that you understand that this is the second time that special ed families that have come out to try and speak are always on the back burner. And it's not fair, and it's insulting to us. So I want to be able to make sure that you not forget that in finding the solution for special ed, that I expect the district to make sure that families are part of that conversation, and not just staff and board members whom we respect, but that it's our children that who are on the line pretty much. Paras should not. I want to also be very clear that paras should not replace teachers. It has to coalesce. We have to make sure that we have enough of everything. But I don't want someone to just be with our son, be on the one-on-one, but that's going to replace the access that our child would have with the general ed teacher. So I want to make sure that both of those are understood very clearly, that they are both equally important in my eyes as a parent. A lot of the paras are not earning enough money nor working enough hours. I know any one of you who works in the private sector or public sector would not show up to that job if there wasn't these additional benefits. And again, these are paras that are working with our children, and when they're not inspired or motivated to be there, it's our child that ends on the short end of the sticks. And this is why we have a lot of parents that have showed up. Now, I want to be able to point these things out. Pay now or pay later means investing in identifying the issues they have now, or pay later when the student needs are a lot more greater and more costly. Intensive remediation, non-public schools, and even residential treatment and legal action comes into play against the district. A lot of the families have met, and I want to challenge every single one of the board members. Having gone for one afternoon to AMS is great. It's one really, really small baby step, but I would ask you to walk a day in our shoes. And every one of the families that are here, I want you to come to our homes. I want you to be a para for the day at any one of the schools here in Albany, so that you understand what those paras and what those teachers have to go through. And we're calling it the Walk a Day in My Shoes campaign. And I'm challenging every single one of the board members to come and stand in our shoes and to understand what families go through. Paul Black, Charles Blanchard, and Ross, you guys have made a lot of comments over the last few months regarding special ed, that it's an entitlement program, that it costs a lot of money. And I wanted you to make sure that you see the faces that are out here, not just of teachers, but of families, on what we have to go through. Sir and gentlemen, it's not an entitlement for what our children, we have to go through on a daily basis with our children. This is why we're here till 9:30 o'clock, even though you knew that this was going to be a subject that had been allocated 45 minutes. The school district is out of compliance, not just with my child, but for every child that's whose family is in the room right now. The school district is out of compliance. Without the adequate staffing, my son did not have a para today, and it's not been the first time. But the school district didn't even have English, the subject of English, when the school year started. And the previous year, he went without math for several weeks. This is what I'm telling you, that we're in a crisis mode. And I need to be able to explain to you, it's not an entitlement. It's a damn good education that we want for our children. And they may have special needs, but we expect you to value us as families, as voters, as homeowners, because special ed families are raising here in Albany. Thank you.
Richard Ventura Usman, 16 years special ed class, Albany High School. I was here last time. Again, I'm going to just reiterate that better pay and benefits, I think, are critical. I hope you all see that at this point. I think, though, it's also important to reiterate what Rich said was that, and what Mr. Black said about working conditions, that the paraeducators are not getting the respect that they deserve as humans and as workers. And one of the ways we can do that is to decouple or decentralize, because right now, and true for all of us, but we're in between and betwixt. We have a special ed department that sort of regulates what we do and how we do things, and then they're also supervised by the general education supervisor on site. So the communication is really poor, as you could well imagine, and it's like you're always in between and betwixt. You never know really who's in charge of your life as a worker. So there's a lot of things we could do in terms of working conditions to make it better for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Julie, and I have twins at Albany Middle School. We've been through Cornell, and now they're in 6th grade. We've had a remarkable experience at Albany Unified School District. My son has just benefited tremendously from being there. The entire time I have seen the para situation be a crisis. I've seen them come to work sick because they don't want to leave the teachers at the risk of not being able to fundamentally do their jobs. It's shaming how little we pay. I did last time I spoke at the board, I had done some research on comparative rates of pay for the Bay Area, and we're just miserably low. And I think what it ends up doing is also directly affecting our children, because if they don't have a good support system, then that causes anxiety disorder to our children. If they're not supported, if they don't have, it's not just about the education, it's also the emotional support. And if you don't have paras that have a decent situation and have enough to live on, they can't provide to our kids what they need in order to be successful in their lives. I mean, academically, he's doing fine, and my son's doing okay, but I see it all the time with the children acting out because there's no consistency, and there has to be some accountability. And when you say you shouldn't come here, I think it was mentioned, you shouldn't come here and that this is not, you don't have anything, you can't do anything about their rates of pay. Who are we supposed to go to? You're the board, we're the public. We're supposed to be able to come to you and say, look, this is a problem. And you're still supposed to say, oh, I didn't know that, now I do. So please pay attention to this, because it's really critical to all of us. And what we're doing in this school district is remarkable, but it should be the way it was so many years ago. It should not be such a difficult thing to pay decent rates to people who do quality work and provide excellent support to our kids. Thank you.
Charlie, did you want to make a clarification?
I just would like to ask staff for a clarification. The pay schedule is negotiated, is it not?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I also want to speak on the issue of paras. My son, Zachary, has been enormously lucky to benefit from a number of really amazing and dedicated paras, and our phenomenal caseworker, Karen, is here as well. I want to, of course, underscore the necessity of paying them a living wage, but I also want to emphasize the importance of things that the district can do to respect them as professionals, both through giving them training and professional development that acknowledges the important role and their role as professionals and as educators, who are really first on the line with our kids. My husband and I have requested a number of times that our para be able to come to our team meetings, let alone our IEP, and have been denied by the district, which seems a gross disrespect of the paraprofessional, quite frankly. Because why do we want them there? Because they have expertise and we value them, and they're with our children every day. They know what kinds of educational, social, other kinds of challenges in a way, and so for them to be a part of that conversation is so valuable. So something that the district, I really hope, will consider in terms of supporting them as professionals is to think about ways in which we can acknowledge them both through how much we pay them, which is so important, is fundamental, but other ways in which they really deserve our respect as part of this educational community. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Amy Appel.
Sorry, I just wanted to make a note that seems to me like a really excellent suggestion, that we allow paras to attend the team meetings. I would love for staff to consider that.
Yes, and I'm kind of keeping a running list of ideas. I mean, I'm not capturing every comment, but I'm definitely typing up all the ideas.
Super, thank you. Sorry, Amy.
Sure. I just wanted to agree with Julie's comments about including the paras in the IEP meetings. At the school, the para is the person who spends the most time with our children and knows them best, knows their needs, and understands when to push and when to let them withdraw from a situation that may be too much for them. My son has autism, and there's a phrase that you hear in special education that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. They're all so different. And the idea that a substitute para would be able to come in to a situation and work with my child without ever seeing his IEP or his behavior plan or having any advice from anyone about how this kid works, it's preposterous. Let's see. I also wanted to mention that as parents of kids who many times cannot tell us what happened during their day, we don't know all the time when our child has not had the para assistance to which they're entitled. And I know that my son, who is fully included in general education with the support of mostly a one-on-one aide, has spent time in the special day class cooling his heels because there was no para available to accompany him to the class where he's entitled to be, and that's shameful. So I think we need more paras who know our children, maybe we need to have an on-call para who's just available at each location, who knows our kids. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Cheryl Thies, and I'm an advocate from the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, and I'm also a longtime Albany parent. I am so grateful for the support Albany has provided to my children over the years. My son, who the district did a beautiful job of supporting, who has autism, is now making six figures at Symantec in LA at the age of 20. Because they don't interview you and ask you social skills questions, they just ask you to do programming, and gosh darn it, he can do that. So I have a lot of gratitude and a lot of respect for the Albany team. And one of the great strengths of this program is the fact that the tenure. If you listen to how long people have been here, general education teachers, special education teachers, and so and some paras as well. I have just a few comments. I mostly came tonight to listen and to learn, but my first comment is I'm concerned that we might be turning over too much of our teaching to paras. Paras should not be the people who are primarily educating our children. A highly qualified teacher should be doing that. So I'd ask the board to consider looking at what are our ratios and what's the deal? I mean, are we using paras to support children who might actually need more specialized instruction from a highly qualified individual to teach them? Children do not come to school to be warehoused. Their right is not to just be led in the building or to be in their classroom. Their right is to receive a meaningful educational benefit. And so we need to make sure that we do that. And I think the beautiful thing about this district is that we're small enough, and we have, again, people with long enough tenure to sit down and have these hard conversations about how we're going to make this happen, but we need to make this happen. The other thing I will say, for those of you who don't know about DREDF and our work, is we are the Parent Training and Information Center that supports Alameda, Contra Costa, and San Joaquin County. So we hear from a lot of families, we get calls, and we sometimes even go to IEP meetings and so on. Every time my child's out of school, I get a robocall. No one's ever robocalled me to tell me the para didn't come to work. It's a legal violation, and you guys are opening yourselves up to some really significant legal action when people like myself are hearing that paras aren't there and it's in the IEP, and It's going on for days and weeks and months. Those are systemic compliance violations. I don't want to see that happen. There's nothing that makes me more frustrated than us spending one dime on legal stuff when we could be providing it to our kids. Okay? So whatever we have to do, let's do that.
I'll make this short. It's past my bedtime, so almost. I agree with what Mr. Ritchie said. I have a son who is at Albany Middle School, and I have 2 kids at Ocean View School. We receive a great education here in Albany, and we love it here. But what Mr. Ritchie said is the fact of the matter is it's not compliant, right? If I sign an IEP saying, hey, my son should get 3 to 5 days of in-class teaching, then we should get 3 to 5 days in-class teaching. And he's not getting that, so it's not being compliant. And then she just mentioned it's a big legal issue, which is true. We shouldn't spend money towards that. We should spend more money towards getting more teachers or getting more people in the classroom. So I agree with everybody, and that's it. Thanks.
Thanks.
Hi, my name's Dan. I have students at Cornell. I wanted to take a quick moment, actually, since I have the opportunity, and thank the board for all the work that you do. I know it's not an easy job. I've possibly considered running myself, but I'm not going to because a number of reasons. So I have a lot of respect for what you do, and I want to thank you. I'm not trying to butter you up with that. I wanted to say that one of the most concerning things as I've been following this is what seems to be a lack of leadership or a failure of leadership, and I'd really like the board to not let that go and take a closer look at that. So that's all I want to say.
Looks like I might be the last one, but you're all welcome to come up after me. Thank you so much.
I think you'll be the last one, Rich, because we're out of time. But go ahead.
I wanted to kind of go back to when I presented to the board November 28th, and I had some ideas, and also I had some ideas on monthly metrics. And this is where I put it in as keeping them honest. The way we stay focused on this is to have special education on the board agenda every month as an agendized item. I don't know what we call review and discuss, I guess. And I gave you a list of things. You all have that paper still, I hope? Yeah? I'm happy to have a discussion with my colleagues or families about this here as well. But these are things that I think if you post every month, it's relatively quick, it's 10 items, then it keeps us in the loop. It keeps teachers in the loops, it keeps students, it keeps families in the loops, and it keeps you in the loops because you have many things on your plate, and it's very easy to lose sight of things. I understand. So this is actually a helpful tool, and I would really appreciate it if we could put this on the agenda every month, 5 minutes, and then 5 minutes of discussion, I guess, right? Because once we get it flowing, it'll work. Okay? What else? I do think, as this gentleman just said, we have some leadership challenges, okay? We really do. We need a significant course change in leadership, whether it's the Department of Special Ed at the board level, whether it's this board right here doing an awesome job that you're here. We don't all agree, I get it, it's a tough job, but you're still here, especially after Instagram. That says something about each one of you, and I appreciate that. But I also know that you can manage your one employee, Ms. Williams, and help her focus on how to manage every department, as Mr. Blanchard said. Okay? 2 years, miscommunication, lack of communication, disrespect, hostile working environment. 2 years, tried to use the system. It shouldn't be that way. That's why we're here. And now We had this wonderful report from Miss Marie, all these wonderful things. Okay? We had a para who has been here 12 years, and the first time they had a meeting with the paras was just a couple of weeks ago, after being here 12 years. This stuff's happening because we're here. Don't be fooled. It's the only reason it's happening is because we're here in public. And the only way you keep people honest is to have it right here every month. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a suggestion for having a special ed report at every board meeting. We have our Promoting Safe, Supportive, and Collaborative Environments report every meeting. We can probably tack a report on how the special ed system is going onto that report and have it at the beginning of each meeting. That's one possibility. What does the board think?
We could, since our safe school updates tend to be anywhere between 7 and 10 minutes, we can tag on another piece of this and put it under safe and collaborative schools. We can add a special ed quick update at each time.
What do you think?
Well, I think it is a good idea to have some kind of report, because I'm not sure about subsuming it under another report.
We could add it as another one.
I think it should be, yeah, its own
Okay,
category.
we'll bring it up tomorrow,
Okay.
this Friday in the agenda meeting. We'll talk about how to put it on. Which brings us, in fact, to...
I wanted to say something earlier that I held off to let the...
Oh, sure, go ahead,
speaker
Jacob.
speak.
Of course.
It's now time?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly talk about, earlier it was mentioned that the board shouldn't micromanage again, or we don't have expertise on special ed things, and then we can direct our one employee, Val, to go ahead and talk to staff. It seems like a lot of times when we get recommendations from the staff, we just go along with what the staff said. I'm seeing that from what I've heard, we have a very educated parents and teachers who I think sometimes can actually provide us that expertise. So a lot of times it just seems like we have people come up here, people speak, they give us ideas, staff comes back with a different recommendation, and then we usually just go ahead and do what staff does. So I don't understand necessarily why it's so hard for the board to, you can't always do what the public is asking, but I've only been on the board for a year, and it seems like a lot of times we don't do anything that the public is asking. So it's like we have these meetings, we have people come up, take time out of their busy lives to come up and speak passionately about something, and then we go ahead and don't do any of it. So it seems like this issue is going to come up more and more, and I would hope that the board, not the staff, will actually listen to what the people are asking. Because from what I've seen, it's a pattern. It seems like we're more up here on the board wanting to, I don't know, somehow have the district office's approval opposed to the people out in the audience who elected us and that I feel we should be accountable to. So that was one thing I wanted to say. And another thing, as far as I had asked earlier too, we've been talking about this for a while, and the thing that Val said was like, okay, it seems like, okay, we're realizing there's issues. So the quick fix is just to go out and hire more people. I'm not against hiring more people. If that's what needs to be done, I'll support that. But I'm a teacher myself, and it just seems a lot of times when teachers are asked to do more, we don't go out and hire extra people to help the teachers to do that. The teachers are just required to do that. But for some reason, district office, it just amazes me. Whenever they're asked to do extra work, it's never, okay, I'll do extra work. It's like, oh no, we need to hire more people. We need to hire more people. And I'll really emphasize it. I'm not against hiring more people. I'm definitely for adding hours for paras and giving them higher wage. So it's not like I'm against that, but it's like, before I'm hearing anybody else is going to step up and do additional work, it's like, oh, let's just hire other people. And if that's going to be the way we run our district, that's fine. But when teachers say, and office managers and everybody else, when they say they're getting kind of overloaded or they are asked to do more than that, we should hire for them too, not just district office.
So I'd like to clarify, I was not suggesting that we hire more people. What I said was that the initial list that was given to the board, presented at a previous board meeting by Mr. Ritchie, that I had a meeting with them because I wanted some clarification on what items were that they were considering additional staffing versus what would be duties that were distributed. And so the meeting that I had with them and answering to the question of would this be an additional staff or would this be a dissemination of duties, what I was presenting to you in my 2 minutes was a clarification of what the meeting that I had with this group of teachers.
But what you sent to me sounded like these were ways to address the problem, but it wasn't having anybody else at district office do more. It was to add 1.4 FTE for whatever it was, and the negotiating thing with ATA that you might have to add another 1.0 FTE. But nowhere did I see anywhere else that employee A, B, C, or D was going to do more, so that 1.4 FTE could have been 0.7, 0.8, 0.9. I don't see.
So I think I can clarify that.
Let's solve the problem and just go out and hire more people before making sure that everyone's doing.
So the one
Okay, we're going to have to extend the meeting again if we're going to continue this conversation. What's the rest of the board feel about that?
I think we can probably wrap it up in 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
I think so. The 1.4 FTE was a clarification when I met with the group of teachers and asking and looking at the calculation. This was for the initial assessments, was what was the, I think it was 2-3 years ago, what the FTE was for initial assessments and how that was reduced and how the proposal was to reinstate or add back the 1.4 FTE. So, and the 1.0 for this other position was an explanation of what this sheet of information that Rich provided to the board, what those pieces were, so they were clarifications. So yes, I did say that the increase that they're asking for is 1 FTE because that is what this group had explained to me. So since that time that I also talked to you, I've had a chance to talk to Carla. Carla's been working with the high school staff on this idea of the case manager, which would not be an increase in FTE. It is a reorganization of classes, in this case just at the high school, a reorganization of classes at the high school so that one special education teacher could take on the case management. So that's not an increase in FTE. It is a creative way of and even being revenue neutral. I hope that explained what you were asking me.
It does a little bit. I've just heard people speaking before saying how it used to be back in the day before a certain amount of year when the student numbers have basically stayed the same, how all this stuff was getting done before. And now it's just, there's extra people, and we could talk about it more. I know I'm just being up front. I'm very frustrated with the way things have been going on. You know, we ask for input and people give it, and staff comes back and we go ahead and basically approve everything.
Kim?
I can speak to my own experience because I also started a year ago on the school board, and I see it differently. I see that for issues that came up regarding start time, either starting the school year earlier or starting the school day later in the morning, that issue went to the wellness committee, which is made up of parents and staff, and the committee then works over the problem and gives their input back to staff, which then will come back to the board through a staff member. But it doesn't mean that the community wasn't involved. In the design teams for the facilities, we involve teachers and principals and community members. And all of that input comes out at those meetings where it's talked over extensively and over, a bunch of different meetings. And then the results come back to the board, as contracts with this entity and that entity. I could go on, after the Instagram incident, Albany Coming Together formed, which is a whole bunch of community members and also teachers and staff and students. And all of that work gets done in the committee and outside of this room, but it comes back to the board in terms of what we're going to spend money on in the budget for professional development, about trips that we're going to take. The Museum of Tolerance was mentioned earlier this evening. So I see that the community and the parents and the teachers and the staff in this community are all working together, I think, remarkably effectively. And then the board, we just get to vote on the contracts and the budget as those parts of each of those icebergs move through the system. So I think that my experience of this past year has been one of seeing a great deal of community involvement and effectively transferred through the process.
Russ.
Yeah, I know we're going along. So I guess a gentle caution to folks about not making any assumptions about what the board members think or feel or have experienced or believe. I've got 2 kids, neither of whom would qualify as special needs, who have cost me lots and lots of sleep over their own issues, over their own successes and failures. And so I am absolutely prepared to listen to people and the issues they have. The thing I heard out here, actually, as a data guy, is there's a huge potential time bomb in the fact that we've got something that many people are measuring and the board knows little to nothing about, save what we heard tonight. So I think when we go to directions to staff, et cetera, I want to hear that there's going to be a plan to show us how much out of compliance we are, how many minutes, how many kids, how often, that the district office and the teachers will agree is a way to measure it accurately. I'm not going to believe any one party. I want to make sure that every one of the parties says, yeah, and look, it turns out to be this many kids or this many minutes per kid. It's a knowable number. Maybe a little hard to measure. We haven't got, everybody reporting everything, but I'm sure you could pretty quickly come up with some pretty gross statistics of it's this bad, and this board needs to know if it's that bad, and we can then take actions at that point. Data is underlying this problem, and data are knowable in this case, and too many people believe they have a lot of data, and I'd love to have it all come to the board in a coherent way.
Charlie.
I have a second request for a staff report, and that is we have heard, at least I have heard tonight, that there are some real concerns around paraeducator scheduling as well as other aspects of the paraeducator program. So I think we need to hear something about that. That should be one of the first things we hear about. But I think I've also heard people ask, well, maybe you need to kind of ask if there are other ways that we should be delivering services for students with special needs that we ought to look at a little bit. So I would encourage a broader question, a deeper question to be asked.
I just want to comment about discussions that the ATA has had with the district administration about staffing at the district office, letters we have written, not getting any response to our concerns, and just, okay, this is who we're going to hire, we're just going to do this because we have so much work to do and we can't possibly not have certain positions. And again, I feel like I'm harping on the same thing, but there was, our enrollment has not grown in many years, and yet our district, the positions at the district level have increased. There are more positions there. And yet, when we bring this up and we ask for hiring freezes, there's no dialogue. We're just told we need the people there. And so it is really frustrating, I think, to hear that, and then also to hear about paraeducators being so underpaid. And so when we're talking about, I think, really where we're going to be spending our money and where we have to make that decision. Like, are we going to really spend our money on direct services to students, right? What are, you know, and I don't really think that those concerns have been really discussed with at least us as ATA. And we have voiced concerns about it. And I really do think we need to look at where can we spend, you know, we budget, right? No money, no money, no money. Where are we really going to spend our money? And where's it going to be most effective? At the district office level with added positions that were not there before, or working with our students, paying our paraeducators more? Thank you.
Okay, I think we need to wrap it up tonight. So can we have a list of the agenda items that we've introduced?
Yes, I think we have 5. AUSD technology update, the state of technology, as well as the stand-up survey data results included in that. The budget committee needs to come back to the board. Adding the special ed report to each meeting, was suggested for about 10 minutes. I'm assuming a separate special ed report on data on compliance. Sorry, there were, and then
We have two contracts are coming back.
and then the 2. Thank you, and then the 2 contracts. That was the
Okay,
5th.
did anyone else?
That's enough.
Anything else? Okay, well, with that, thank you all for coming out. This meeting is adjourned.